Tiana is getting married. Come to the wedding. After moving out from Derek and Tiana's place, who had harassed me for 10 years, and living alone in my new home, I got a message from him for the first time in 5 years. As I was shocked and confused by the news, someone revealed to me a surprising fact. Hearing that, I was trembling with anger and decided to take revenge on Derek and Tiana. I will never forgive them. I'll make them pay. I started planning my revenge and immediately set about executing it. My name is Lindsay, 55 years old. I married Derek after meeting him through a marriage consulting agency. Soon, it will be 10 years since we became husband and wife. These 10 years have been like living in hell for me. Derek and I both had children from previous relationships. He had a daughter and I had a son. At that time, I was 45 years old, working as an office worker at a factory, while visiting the marriage consulting agency. Derek was 35 years old, a company employee. His daughter, Tiana, was 15 years old and in the 8th grade when we remarried. My son, Frederick, was 25 years old and working as a professional. Frederick has a gentle nature and has been looking after me more than anyone else since his father passed away, supporting me by my side. He landed a job at a major brokerage firm, a 1-hour drive each way from our home. I thought it would be tough for him to commute every day and suggested he live on his own. However, Frederick stubbornly refused my suggestion. If I leave home, what will you do, Mom? If something happens when you're alone, there won't be anyone around to help you. Since losing his father, Frederick has become very worried about me. Certainly, the loss of his father must have connected to a strong anxiety within him. I couldn't keep him tied to our home because of me. I had to start thinking about a new way of life and decided to look for a partner to remarry. That's how I met Derek. Having both been through similar struggles with stepchildren, we got along well. I thought we could support each other and live together, but reality was not so sweet. The first 6 months after marrying Derek, our relationship was good. Tiana was friendly and made an effort to build a relationship with me. Seeing their attitude, Frederick felt relieved, and starting with Tiana's promotion to the next grade, he began to consider living on his own. I was worried about what would happen to Mom, but both of them are good people, and I've been thinking maybe it's time for me to start living on my own. I can't stay at my parents' house forever, and I've got a girlfriend now. I want to make sure I give her and our time together the attention it deserves. Seeing Frederick's shy smile made me smile with surprise and joy. I think Frederick has been holding back on dating because of me. But if my marriage to Derek is pushing him to move forward, nothing could make me happier. He's sacrificed so much of his life for me. I just want him to be happy. I don't want him to feel any less because of me. With all my heart, I decided to support Frederick's independence. However, Derek was opposed to this. What? Frederick is starting to live on his own? That's out of the question. Who do you think is going to cover the rent, high heating bills, and living expenses now? I couldn't believe these words when I heard them because I thought Derek would agree. Derek was, in fact, relying on Frederick's money. Frederick had been contributing tens of thousands of dollars to our household expenses since it was just the two of us. I'm working and at an age where I should be living on my own, right? So, it's only natural that I contribute to the household expenses while I'm still living at home. He said this as he took on a portion of the rent, utilities, and some living expenses every month. But we could cover those expenses as a couple. I never thought it was Frederick's duty to bear the cost of living. That's why Derek's attitude surprised me. From his words and tone, he was treating Frederick like a cash cow. You don't earn much from your part-time job, and if Frederick leaves, my burden will only increase. Stop it. I don't make that much salary to begin with. Can't you somehow persuade Frederick to stay? It's impossible for me to take care of you and Tiana alone. This was the first time I felt annoyed at Derek, who was complaining while lazily taking off his tie, possibly tired from work. When I remarried Derek, I quit my factory job. His place was far from where I worked. It wasn't possible to make Tiana, who was preparing for exams, do all the household chores, and I had to take on the primary role. So, I resigned from my full-time job upon marrying and joined a creative cuisine restaurant nearby as a part-time employee. Together, we could support Tiana and make a living. However, Derek complained about his increasing burden and was not willing to accept Frederick living on his own. Unable to bear it any longer, I cut off his complaints. Then, if I increase my work hours and earn more, you won't have any complaints, right? Keeping Frederick at home was never an option for me. It's unthinkable to have a young, working parent be burdened with taking care of me. Even if I were unable to work, I have no intention of becoming a mother who troubles her son. We should take care of our own affairs. If money is the issue, I'll earn it myself. Thinking this, I glared at Derek with determination, and he started to mock me with a sneer. It's fine if you want to earn more, but can you still manage the household chores as before? I'm working full-time, and Tiana is in high school. I won't forgive you if you start relying on us. We don't have any time for household chores. If you can perfectly manage both work and home and earn the money that Frederick was covering, I don't mind letting him move out. But, if you fail even once, I'll forcibly bring Frederick back. Got it? Derek's words felt like a threat, but I nodded without submitting to him. If I can manage, Frederick won't be burdened. Then, I should just do it. I couldn't stay silent after being provoked like that. My competitive nature made me take on Derek's challenge. And after Frederick left, I faced hellish days both physically and mentally. In addition to the living expenses Frederick used to pay, Tiana's advancement increased the household chores, like making sandwiches for lunch and washing uniforms for club activities. I thought Tiana would choose a literary club since she wanted to become a fashion designer, but she joined the volleyball team unexpectedly. Her food intake suddenly increased, the household chores more than doubled, and the burden kept growing. Hey, why does this fabric softener smell different? I told you, use this one for my clothes, and this one for the uniforms. Tiana became very particular after reaching the 9th grade. Becoming a regular in the volleyball team as a 9th grader, Tiana grew stricter and often took out her stress on me, making it a daily occurrence. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful next time. You're really useless. I think I preferred the other mom. She frequently brought up Derek's ex-wife, who had cheated and left, and was very critical about her lunches. Using frozen food would result in being yelled at, and at times, she refused to eat it altogether. Reaching my limit, I discussed this with Derek. However, Derek, as if waiting for this moment, began to threaten me with a smug smile, bringing Frederick into the conversation. You haven't forgotten, have you? If you can't handle the household chores, I'll bring Frederick back. Tiana is a teenage girl. It's natural for her to develop strong preferences. Imagine if she gets ridiculed by her friends for having lunches full of frozen food. What if she stops going to school because of that? Can you take responsibility? She's working hard and has become a regular on her team. If your actions lead Tiana to drop out of school, I won't forgive you. But I have a job too, and a little help wouldn't hurt. No. If your job is an excuse for neglecting household chores, then bring Frederick back to cover the finances. If you reduce your workload, there won't be any problems, right? You made that promise, so stick to it. If you can't, then talk to Frederick about coming back. Period. Threatened with the prospect of Frederick being brought back for any issue, I found myself in a situation where I couldn't even think of enduring this life without someone to consult. I had reached my limit. I wished I could just disappear from this world. It was then that I was worn out both mentally and physically, and ended up fainting at work. It's great that you work hard, but she's clearly too pale. Everyone's worried. Is something going on at home? If the job is too much, just say so. We don't want you overworking. We can adjust your work hours as much as needed. After collapsing from exhaustion, I was allowed to rest in the break room at the office. While crying over my chosen path and feeling ashamed, the concerned owner, Jameson, approached me, and I couldn't help but sob. Hearing the commotion, other colleagues and staff came to check on me, concerned. Yet, I couldn't share my home situation with anyone. I was afraid of being judged. Frederick had left home, feeling secure because I had remarried. If I talked about what was happening, he might suggest divorce. Some might advise me to ask Frederick to come back. But doing that would mean burdening Frederick unnecessarily, taking away his freedom. I didn't want that. I didn't want to cause him any more trouble because of me. That's why I couldn't talk about Derek and the rest. I wanted to say it, but I couldn't. Living with this dilemma, I continued living like this for 10 years. Even after graduating high school, Tiana didn't leave home and went to a vocational school for fashion design. She studied there for 2 years and then got a job at an apparel maker. The harassment towards me continued, now including complaints about my clothes, hairstyle, and makeup. Mom, you really have no taste in fashion. The outfit you wore to my entrance ceremony was especially bad. I got mocked by my friends later. Considering you're the mother of a daughter aiming to be a fashion designer, can't you try to be a bit more stylish? That's why Dad doesn't see you as a woman anymore. Tiana mocked me, and those days of being ridiculed continued. Yet, I couldn't retaliate and only endured. After Frederick left, Derek never spent time as a couple, regardless of whether I managed the household expenses or perfected household chores. Life felt more like that of a housekeeper than a family member. As Tiana said, he hadn't treated me as a woman at all in these 10 years. I've reached my limit. I hate this life. I want to escape right now. Having reached my limit, I begged Derek and Tiana for a separation. Separation? Don't joke around. Who's going to do the household chores? Yeah, I'm busy with work, and Dad's too caught up with overtime to do chores. There's no way you can leave this house. I'm not a maid. My patience snapped at their selfish arguments, and I screamed hysterically. For these 10 years, I've lived like a slave. I'm sick of it. I have my own life too. Tiana, you're 25, aren't you? How long do you plan to rely on your parents? Why not start managing your own life? A colleague's daughter said she's been independent and working for a major company since she was 20, and she does her own chores. What about you? You're 5 years older, yet still have your mother make sandwiches and leave the laundry and ironing to me. Aren't you embarrassed? When I was 20, I was working and managing my own affairs. Unleashing my pent-up frustrations, Tiana responded with a loud, "Huh? How dare you compare your daughter to someone else's child? You should be grateful you can take care of your precious daughter. To imply I'm at fault with the way you speak, I think that's wrong." That's right, Lindsay. Tiana is at a critical age, and she's busy with work. Supporting each other is what being a family is about. But you're just focused on yourself. Aren't you ashamed? Their rebuttals only fueled my anger. Do they even understand the meaning of their words? I looked at them with disdain for their unbelievable statements. Ashamed, you say? What about you? Aren't you embarrassed that your daughter has grown up to be such a lazy and worthless woman? It's because you've coddled her like this that she can't do anything. Derek seemed angered by my response, glaring at me with bloodshot eyes, ready to confront me. What did you say to your husband? Whatever, Dad. We're better off without this twisted, old-fashioned woman in our house. Just looking at her stresses me out. Hit with the truth, Tiana cut off Derek's words and sighed in exasperation. Realizing I was finally free from them, I smiled, relieved, and silently celebrated with a fist pump. Thus, I successfully moved out of Derek's house. I moved into an apartment near my workplace, introduced by Jameson, my boss. I had consulted with Jameson about my family situation beforehand, and he suggested I live in the apartment. It was owned by Dahlia, Jameson's wife, and her family, and they had a vacancy at the time. I hesitated for a moment because, honestly, living alone was daunting. Having someone nearby would be best. Jameson and his family offered protection against anything Derek and Tiana might say, allowing me to live there. Lindsay always contributes so much. We help each other out in times of need. If anything happens, just let us know, okay? You can use Jameson as your bodyguard. I agonized over telling them about my home situation. I worried about getting them involved in my troubles with Derek and Tiana or being judged for my feelings towards Frederick. Amidst my fears and concerns, Dahlia was the one who alleviated them. We've both noticed how you've been working as if driven by something. There must be a reason for it, right? Neither Jameson nor I would ever trample on your feelings. I worry about you like family. So, if you're in trouble, don't hesitate to rely on us. I want to support you for a long time. Moved by Dahlia's kind and warm words, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore and shared everything I hadn't been able to say. After hearing my story, Dahlia hugged me, and Jameson crossed his arms with a stern look. If you're okay with it, I can talk to Derek for you, he offered. Dahlia said, you can always run away to our place. Taking care of my living situation. With their support, I successfully moved out. After leaving, I hardly responded to Derek and Tiana's attempts to contact me. They probably wanted to persuade me to return, but living with them again was the last thing I wanted. I explained the situation to Frederick, letting him know about the separation. If it came to divorce, I might get a share of the assets, possibly some of Derek's savings. However, he was very sensitive about money. Despite the separation, the agreement to pay for Derek's household expenses remained unchanged, and it was unlikely Derek would initiate a divorce. They thought everything was fine as long as I could live independently as before. But my plan didn't end there. 5 years later, Derek suddenly called. Feeling uneasy, I hesitated to answer at first. But, following someone's advice, I decided to respond. Tiana is getting married. Come to the wedding. I was surprised to hear over the phone that Tiana was having a shotgun marriage. Her partner owned several companies and was wealthy. They wanted to capture her in a beautiful wedding dress before her pregnancy showed too much, so they hastily arranged the wedding. The date was set for a week later. The wedding was to be a grand affair. Okay. Initially unsure about attending, Frederick happened to visit me, and he persuaded me through written notes to go. I'll explain the reason later. Reading his note, I informed Derek of my decision to attend. Derek, satisfied with my response, abruptly ended the call without hearing the rest. What's going on, Frederick? How did you know about Tiana's marriage? After making sure the call had ended, I turned to Frederick to press for details. Just minutes before Derek's call, Frederick had already informed me about the wedding. However, since leaving home, Frederick hadn't had any contact with Tiana or Derek. So, how did he know about Tiana's marriage before me? As I looked at him confused, Frederick began to speak seriously. Mom, will you help me with what I'm about to do? And so, I was shocked by what Frederick told me. On the wedding day, a week later, I was dressed up, waiting for Frederick's arrival at the venue. Long time no see, but you still lack any charm, or how should I put it? You've really taken on the look of an old lady, in body and face. It wasn't Frederick who appeared, but Derek in a suit. He seemed to be showing off, wearing brand accessories he usually didn't, and his suit looked expensive, as if it was newly purchased. Well, compared to your usual sloppy look, this is somewhat better. I was worried how it would look, the mother of the bride being so unfashionable at her own daughter's wedding. He was still the same man, saying unnecessary things. Being married to such a person was embarrassing beyond words. Feeling disgusted by his tasteless remarks, Frederick arrived, standing protectively between Derek and me. It's been a while, Dad. Frederick, trying not to arouse suspicion, smiled warmly at Derek. Without any doubt about his demeanor, Derek engaged in light conversation with Frederick. It's been a while since we met. How about a drink together? Thanks. I have some people to greet, so let's drink later. I have a lot to talk about. I didn't miss the sly smile on Frederick's face. Unaware of Frederick's expression, Derek led us into the venue. Our seats are over there. Let's go. As we entered the venue and the ceremony was about to start, Derek urged me to sit down. However, for some reason, I headed towards the groom's side seats. Noticing this, Derek hastily grabbed my wrist to stop me. Where do you think you're going? Our seats are over there. Don't embarrass me. What are you talking about? I shook off Derek's hand, glaring at him. As I did, an angry Derek glared back at me. Ah, there you are. Lindsay, over here, this way. What? What? Surprisingly, Jameson and Dahlia, sitting on the bride's side, noticed me and called me over, pulling me away from Derek. Derek, unable to grasp the situation, stood agape in confusion. Tiana, who had been watching from the sidelines, also seemed surprised and hastily came over to my seat to explain the situation. That person is my mother, and I think she's supposed to sit on the bride's side. The appearance of Tiana in her wedding dress caused a stir in the venue. Everyone's gaze turned our way, wondering what had happened. Lindsay is supposed to sit on the groom's side. After all, I was the one who invited her. Craig, the groom, who had been watching from the sidelines, emerged and dropped this surprising comment to Tiana. Confused, Tiana and Derek looked bewilderedly between Craig and Dahlia. The guests, also confused by the situation, exchanged puzzled looks, wondering what was going on. How do you know Lindsay? And why is she on the groom's side? It's only natural you wouldn't know. The person you were planning to marry is my son, and Lindsay works at my company. What? What? Derek and Tiana were shocked by this unexpected turn of events. It turned out that Tiana's fiancé, Craig, was Jameson's son and the president of Frederick's workplace. After graduating from high school, Craig had left home, taught himself about stocks, and acquired the skills to run a company. Frederick admired Craig and joined his company. Initially unaware, I worked with Jameson's family, and it was revealed that Craig's childhood friend and Frederick's girlfriend, Jennifer, were the same person. Upon hearing Craig was getting married, Frederick contacted me after learning who the bride was. I then explained the situation to Jameson's family, leading to the current arrangement. When Frederick told me, I was shocked. To think Frederick's dear friend was marrying someone as vile as you. At that moment, murmurs spread, and people began whispering Tiana's misdeeds. Tiana started to retort but stopped, likely because Craig was there. She hastily covered her mouth, forcing a strained smile and speaking as politely as she could to me. Mom, please stop making such bad jokes here. It makes everyone uneasy. That's right, Lindsay. There's a time and place for everything. Derek attempted to retort with a forced smile, but Frederick stood protectively in front of me. Frederick looked down on Derek with a resolute stance, making Derek, who was intimidated by Frederick's height, step back. Then, were the words you've always said to me considered appropriate? As I signaled to a staff member, the lights in the venue dimmed, and a video started playing on the screen. The next moment, Derek and Tiana's faces drained of color as the venue buzzed. The video showed scenes of me being harassed and mistreated by Derek and Tiana during our time together. What is that? Isn't that bad? The president's wife, is she really like that? Is the president okay marrying that kind of woman? That's not good, right? The room quickly filled with criticism towards Tiana and concern for Craig. Derek yelled at the staff to stop the video, while Tiana, visibly shaken, covered her mouth with her hands, trembling. What do you mean by this? Are you trying to ruin Tiana's happiness? Ruin her happiness? Hearing those words, Frederick angrily retorted. How can you say that when you've never cared about Mom's happiness? Huh? Frederick is usually mild-mannered and kind. He rarely gets angry, usually brushing off unpleasant situations with a laugh, showing great tolerance. But this time involved his mother and a respected company president who is also a dear friend. Two people important to Frederick were being hurt by Derek and his actions. Unable to contain his anger, Derek collapsed in a pathetic heap, trembling with fear under Frederick's intimidation. Regaining her composure, Tiana must have thought it necessary to break the tension. She weakly clung to Craig, pleading, Indeed, I was a lazy daughter until Mom left. But I've changed since discovering I was pregnant. I've learned the importance of caring for others. I've resolved to cherish you and our baby. So, can you trust me? As the father of this child, you're prepared to raise it together, right? Realizing there was no escaping the evidence presented in the video, Tiana adopted a repentant stance, looking up at Craig with moist eyes. She wasn't unattractive. She truly believed her tears could sway the situation. However, her last words were a little bit out of line. Frederick, as if he had been waiting for this, approached Tiana with a sly smile. All that talk of changing your heart is useless. Unless you can show proof that the child's father is him, no one will believe your words. What? What are you talking about? The tears in Tiana's eyes vanished instantly, replaced by a cold gaze directed at Frederick. Seeing this, Frederick loudly shared the situation, cornering Tiana. Well, you see, I heard from Craig about how you two met and the likely date you got pregnant. But there's something odd. Craig is sterile. What? The venue erupted in shock upon hearing this revelation. Tiana, caught off guard by Frederick's statement, was visibly shocked. I was surprised when Craig consulted me about his sterility. Could Craig, who hasn't undergone surgery or treatment, possibly father a child? We researched it thoroughly, but it just wasn't possible. Even after retesting, the results were the same. We figured you must be plotting something, and when we found out it was you, we couldn't help but laugh. You must have concocted a lie, aiming for the president's wealth, trying to deceive Craig. Caught in her scheme, Tiana panicked as everyone in the venue looked at her and Derek with disdain. By the way, we've also figured out who the father of your child is. Imagine having an affair with an employee of your own company. If it turns out you're pregnant with a married man's child, that's going to be quite the scandal. Turns out, I'm good friends with the executive vice president of your company. We even go out for drinks. He knows Craig and is here today. You thought you could trick him into marrying you by playing this game? Too bad, you should have done your homework better. That's why you got caught like this. Faced with an undeniable disadvantage, Tiana looked down in frustration, and Derek's face turned pale. There was no escaping this situation now. You really fooled me. That's not. I mean, any more excuses you make now will just make you look pathetic. I rebuked Tiana as she desperately tried to salvage the situation. Do you understand why Jameson and Craig went through with this wedding, despite knowing everything? What? No way! Hearing my words, Derek, unlike the confused Tiana, looked at me in shock, having guessed the truth. Yes. It was all to take revenge on you two for everything you've done, planned by me with everyone's help. What? Craig and Frederick had realized Tiana's lies early on. But Frederick pleaded with Craig not to cancel the wedding. Frederick knew. He knew about the terrible harassment I suffered from Derek. And that I could not divorce Derek because of him. He had acted knowing all this. I found it by accident when you were sleeping. The diary you started keeping the day I left. Frederick, who had come to my new home as a surprise, stumbled upon my diary and learned the whole story. He immediately worked hard to lessen my burden, even telling his girlfriend, Jennifer, about it, and convinced her to move in together. But when Craig consulted him about this matter, Frederick saw it as an opportunity for revenge. With Tiana's company's executive also present, his discovery of her downfall led him to glare at her and report to the president immediately. After hearing the details from Frederick, the man involved was subject to a company meeting. Tiana, once a candidate for the next section chief, would now face social sanctions due to this incident and her misconduct. Realizing everything, Derek and Tiana were utterly disheartened and collapsed on the spot. To them, I further stated, "This isn't the end of everything. The real hell starts now. Be prepared." Thus, I successfully exacted long-awaited revenge with Frederick, and Tiana's marriage completely fell apart. I thought the guests would be troubled, but they laughed, saying it was entertaining to watch, and no one blamed us for the incident. Following the event, Tiana could no longer stay at her company and was dismissed along with her affair partner. As for Derek, rumors spread, and he was despised by neighbors and colleagues alike. Unable to live decently, he was rumored to have fled the town. Seizing Derek's departure as an opportunity, I presented him with divorce demands. Knowing he would object, I hired a lawyer and submitted the video shown at the venue and other evidence confirming Tiana's harassment towards me. We took the case to divorce mediation and won the trial. I received $10,000 in compensation for the emotional distress suffered throughout the marriage. Thus, peace returned to my life. I continue to work at Jameson's company. Frederick offered to live together after this ordeal, but as much as I appreciated it, I declined. You might start your own family, Frederick, and I have people who care about me like family around. So, I'll be fine. You focus on living your life, with Jennifer by your side, okay? Smiling at Jennifer and Frederick, they shyly smiled back. I will keep working with Jameson, moving forward for my own happiness this time. Suddenly, the electricity bill skyrocketed. In a panic, we called the utility company, and the technician came over, looking puzzled. "Have you seen this wire before?" As my husband, Sam, and I rushed over, the technician carefully moved a plant nearby to make it easier for us to see. From an external outlet of our house, a strange wiring extended, heading towards the in-laws' house. "Do you know anything about this wiring?" Sam and I exchanged glances. We were probably thinking the same thing. "Hey, Sam. Could this be?" "Yeah, no doubt. This is why our electricity bill suddenly spiked." Sam then reached out to the outlet and quickly unplugged the wiring. The moment he did it, a high-pitched scream came from the direction of the in-laws' house. "Ah!" It must be Maëlle, Nicola. Then, some hysterical muttering was heard, and the voice came out of the door, heading our way. And there, Nicola burst out from the garden. "I am Mary, a 32-year-old housewife. My hobby is eating sweets. Every day, I gather information about sweets by asking friends or researching on my own. Sam, my kind husband, always accompanies me in this hobby. Sam and I, both the same age, have been together since college. I have always loved Sam for his kindness, unchanged from the moment we met. Incidentally, I also adored Tony and Nicola, Sam's parents who raised him. Many of my married friends struggle with their Maëlles. I've even heard stories that ended in divorce due to issues with the Maëlle. Fortunately, such problems were irrelevant to our family. Nicola, who shares my love for sweets, always delights in the treats I bring over, and my Fael, Tony, though a man of few words, always gives a sense of comfort with his constant smiles. Both of them are dear to me, and I like them so much. Tony and Nicola now live about a 30-minute drive away. Not too close, yet not too far, just the right distance. But sometimes, I think, would it be possible to live together with such a couple? Not that I want to live together. But, perhaps, it could work out well. I was fond of them to the point of entertaining such thoughts. However, the world isn't always so sweet, as I would later come to realize the truth. One day, I was baffled by the news Sam shared with me. "What? Tony and Nicola?" Turns out, Tony and Nicola were moving into the vacant house next door to us. I had assumed their in-laws' house was owned, but it turned out to be a rental. They were considering moving since their place was getting old. And when they found out the house next to ours was vacant, they set their sights on it. It was an unexpected close-distance living arrangement. I was instantly overwhelmed by anxiety. We had been getting along fine with Tony and Nicola, but would it continue to be okay? Living next door meant we could see each other every day if we wanted. I liked Tony and Nicola, but seeing them every day might be too much. But it was too late to say, "It's too close, so please don't move in." When Sam heard about the move, he gently advised Tony and Nicola that it might not be a good idea. However, they didn't listen, saying, "We're so close now, it'll be fine." I wanted to kick myself for my previously optimistic thought that living together could be possible. As my anxiety grew, Tony and Nicola moved in. Though I greeted them warily, things seemed fine at first. We kept a good distance, and some boundaries were established. But as they settled in, Nicola began to cross those boundaries. That was the force that overcame all the actions we didn't want her to do. Unannounced visits became the norm, and when she came over, they acted as if our house was her own. Not only that, but our actions seemed to be constantly monitored. Then, after finishing an unannounced visit and dinner inspection one day, Nicola made an outrageous suggestion. Hey, Mary, I've been thinking, why don't you stop locking the door? What? I couldn't believe my ears. Because can you believe it? In this day and age, Nicola was suggesting we keep our house unlocked, making it accessible to anyone at any time. That's not reassuring at all. Of course, it's unwelcome. Ever since Nicola moved in, even the doorbell ringing startles me, and now there's the added possibility of Nicola slipping into our house unnoticed. Again, of course, that's unwelcome, given how dangerous things are these days. I guess not locking the door does feel a bit scary, I said with a smile, trying not to offend, but Nicola frowned. Oh, Mary, you worry too much. But it's okay. Once we get to know the neighbors better, I'll make sure they look out for us. Until then, well, Tony and I are around. We'll be popping by often, she said, her words coming from a place of goodwill, which I appreciated. That's why I couldn't say that her frequent visits were becoming a burden. But there's only so much one can take. Last week, Nicola came over every day for 7 days. I end up having tea with Nicola at our house every day. It's no wonder frustrations arise when we're together so much. I've really come to understand that maintaining distance is crucial in the relationship between a mother-in-law and her son's wife. Nicola has been doing as she pleases, leaving unwanted plants in our yard or planting flowers without asking me. If it were once in a few months, I could tolerate it, but daily is a different story. Regarding the locking of the doors, Nicola has brought it up several times since. I've managed to convince her by emphasizing security consciousness. But then, Nicola started asking for a spare key. That's something I'll have to get Sam to refuse. There's no way I can give such a terrifying item to Nicola as she is now. Though Nicola can be difficult, I hadn't come to dislike her yet. Her meddling comes from a place of kindness. I felt more guilt about rejecting her than anything. But over time, my feelings started to change. Whether it's me who has changed, Nicola, or both, I can't say. But I began to feel discomfort and irritation at Nicola's remarks. It was a few months after Nicola and her family moved in. By then, Nicola's visits after lunch had become a routine part of our household. As for Tony, when I asked what he was up to, it seems he's usually out walking or shopping by himself. I suggested, "You could go with him." But she declined, saying, "Walking tires me out." Lately, Nicola has turned into a rather spiteful mother-in-law. When I make tea, she used to simply thank me, but now she always has a complaint: it's lukewarm or it's too weak. Whenever she opens her mouth, it's either gossip or criticism. Being with Nicola makes me feel negative. Yet, I can't just refuse her, so I nod along and force a smile. It's terrible, isn't it? The grass in their yard has been left to grow wild. I'm almost tempted to cut it myself. Nicola was passionately discussing a neighbor's neglected garden today. Then I called out to them. "Oh." She stopped talking suddenly, so I instinctively followed her gaze, which had turned towards the bookshelf. Perhaps she found a book that interested her. It would be nice if we could read together in silence. Did you find a book that interests you? I was about to stand up and head to the bookshelf when Nicola reached for something not on the bookshelf but on the shelf next to it. "Nicola! That's not okay!" I saw what she had taken and reached out hastily. But Nicola opened it with an unaffected expression. "Oh my! Just look at this, Mary. Didn't we overspend last month? Look at this electricity bill. It's twice what we pay at our house." Nicola was looking over our household budget book as if it were a gossip magazine. "Please stop. Give it back," I said, snatching it away, and Nicola laughed. "No need to panic. It's just that, Mary, you seem a bit bad at saving, aren't you? Poor Sam, having a wife who can't save money. You should try a little harder, okay? I could feel my face getting hot. The cover and spine clearly labeled it as a household budget book. Yet, the audacity to open someone else's budget book was unbelievable. And sweets, too. I love sweets as well, so I understand, but a wife who can't save shouldn't be entitled to sweets, should she? Nicola went on to criticize me for spending too much on groceries and unbelievable electricity bills. Then bragged about how good she is at saving. After a while, she seemed satisfied and left. After Nicola's departure, I was so frustrated that I couldn't stop crying. The stress might have been building up. I just can't take it anymore. I cried until Sam came home. Mom's words don't have to bother you. I know it's hard. I'm really sorry. I'll tell her not to come over anymore. Thanks, I appreciate it. After being comforted by Sam, I felt a bit better and decided to discuss something else. It was about the electricity bill. Just like Nicola pointed out, it was high. There hadn't been any changes, yet the bill had suddenly spiked these past few months. I was concerned, but dealing with Nicola had distracted me. Sam looked at the electricity bill and frowned. This is definitely strange. Yeah, isn't it? The next bill is coming soon, right? If it's still odd, we should contact the power company. A few days later, a bill arrived for over $1,300, more than double the usual. We hurriedly decided to have the power company come and check. The power company employee thoroughly inspected everything. Then, we were called over to see something peculiar. Did you know about this line? Rushing over, the employee moved a plant nearby so we could see better. Hidden by long leaves was an external outlet we hadn't used since the house was built. Having completely forgotten about it. From that outlet, as the employee had said, a wire extended towards the in-laws' house. Do you know anything about wire? Sam and I looked at each other. Likely thinking the same thing. Hey, Sam. This means... Yeah, no doubt. This is why our electricity bill suddenly increased. Just to be sure, we followed the wiring with the employee. Pushing aside hedges and overgrown weeds, we found the wire indeed entered the in-laws' house shed. We couldn't see where it connected from there, but it was clear the in-laws' house was involved. The employee's expression hardened. Should we call the police? No, it might come to that, but let's talk first. This house belongs to our parents. The employee, tense at first with the suspicion of electricity theft, relaxed upon learning it was a family home. Is that so? Then I'll leave it to you. Thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it. We escorted the employee back to our driveway and watched him leave. After saying goodbye, we faced each other, thinking. Sam sighed deeply, holding his head. I'm sorry for having such a mom. Don't worry about it, or I can't really say that. What do we do now? Tony and Nicola were probably home, as usual. Should we go talk to them now, or plan a strategy first? Sam, hand over his mouth, walked towards the external outlet left exposed after the employee moved the plant. Earlier, the staff avoided the plant, so I could clearly see the external outlet. Thinking about it, Nicola placing the plant there might have been to hide it. It felt wrong to suspect her, but it seemed the only logical explanation. What's this connected to? Sam then reached for the outlet and quickly pulled out the wiring. Is it okay to pull it out? I just did. Thinking about them taking electricity from our house all this time makes me angry. Well, the employee is a witness. They can't talk their way out of this. If needed, we have that. You're right. I nodded in agreement. That's when it happened. Ah! A high-pitched scream came from the in-laws' house. It must have been Nicola. Next, some hysterical mumbling, then the voice moved towards the door and headed our way. Nicola burst out of the house towards the garden with force. Wow! She hadn't expected anyone to be there. Seeing us, Nicola exclaimed in shock. Oh! You scared me! What are you doing there? She came at us aggressively, so I stood my ground and replied. What about you, Nicola? Do you need something in our garden? You seemed quite flustered. Well, that's... Nicola awkwardly averted her eyes. Sam, holding the unplugged wire firmly in his hands, was right there. Nicola exclaimed, "Ah!" and tried to snatch the wire from Sam's hands. Sam twisted away, hiding the wire behind his back. What are you doing? No, that's my line. Sam held the wire in front of Nicola's face and said in a low, serious voice. This was plugged into our outlet. Tom emphasized our, and Nicola glanced upwards, momentarily flustered. So what? Do you know where this wire leads? I have no idea about that. But put it back right now. It's causing trouble over here because it's unplugged. She demanded it should be plugged back in without knowing where it leads. And she is claiming harm from it being unplugged. That was as practically an admission of guilt. Yet, Nicola seemed unapologetically frantic. The reason for Nicola's panic was clear. I stood next to Sam, smiling brightly. Nicola, please calm down. We can't plug in a wire when we don't know where it leads. This is our outlet, you know? It's fine to plug it in. Just a bit won't hurt. So. Oh. Nicola, you've always told me not to waste electricity, even a little, and that Sam is unfortunate to have a wife who can't even save on electricity. You said that, didn't you? Well, that's... Nicola was restless. It's too late. She murmured softly, almost panicking. What time is it now? It's 9:57 a.m. It's no use now. With that, Nicola ran off, stumbling as she went. Sam was puzzled by Nicola's bizarre behavior, but I knew the reason. I whispered to Sam. What? So that's what it was. Maybe if we wait at home, they'll come by eventually? Sounds like it. Sam threw the wire down, and we headed back inside. A few minutes later, there was a sound at the door, followed by the doorbell. It was Nicola. I unlocked the door and opened it. Hello, Nicola. About earlier. Shut up! Move! As soon as the door opened, Nicola pushed past me, clicking her tongue as she entered. She was visibly in a bad mood. Stomping through the house like a monster, she plopped down on the sofa. Sam, already in the living room, started to speak, but Nicola beat him to it. I'm so thirsty. What about my tea? You're so slow. You should move before being asked. That's the rule, isn't it? Yes. And you locked the door again, didn't you? This is why people say the son's wife in this neighborhood is so cold. As if there's anything in this house worth stealing. Pretending to be all high and mighty is just annoying. Huh? Nicola continued to complain. I can't stand it anymore. I grabbed a half-empty plastic bottle nearby and slammed it on the table in front of Nicola. She froze, eyes wide. Mary! Here, water for you. And you mentioned there's nothing to steal, But unfortunately, there are greedy and dirty people out there. Like someone who would steal electricity, for example. Nicola's face showed turmoil. I sat down next to Nicola. Despite being right beside her, Nicola wouldn't even look at me. She looked down, her face turning pale. "What's wrong, Mary? You're completely different." "Oh, Nicola. There's only so much I can take. Did you think I was some kind of saint?" I tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but Nicola looked as if she had encountered a demon rather than a deity. Nicola looked at Sam for help, but he just shook his head silently. Nicola had no allies, with an angry daughter-in-law beside her and Sam. As there was no one inclined to help nearby, Nicola's next move was predictable. "I'm sorry. I just remembered something. I have to go now." "You're not going anywhere." I pressed down on Nicola's shoulder as she tried to stand up from the sofa. Nicola's rear sank back into the sofa. "Mary. Really today? You were the one who said you were thirsty, weren't you, Nicola? Surely you're not saying you can't drink my water? After making such a fuss, that wouldn't make sense, would it?" Nicola, with tears in her eyes, reached for the plastic bottle but was stopped by Sam. Nicola looked relieved, but I didn't actually want to make her drink the leftover water. The real issue was yet to be addressed. "When did you start stealing our electricity?" "Stealing? What an awful thing to say! But the fact is, the wiring plugged into our outlet was leading to your house, wasn't it?" Nicola tried to speak several times, searching for an excuse, but couldn't find any that would work. There was no way to talk her way out of this situation. All that was left was for Nicola to admit and apologize. I thought that was going to happen, but it seemed luck smiled on Nicola for a moment. The doorbell rang, and when I checked, Tony was there. "Is Nicola here?" It seemed Tony had gone out for a bit and came back to find the door unlocked, the TV on, but Nicola missing, so he was worried. "Tony!" Nicola cried for help as if reinforcements had arrived. Tony was confused by Nicola's unusual state. Then, Sam explained everything from the beginning. After thinking for a moment, Tony slowly said, "Isn't there some mistake here?" It's hard to believe at first that his wife was secretly stealing electricity from his son and daughter-in-law's home. "So, who did the wiring? Do you expect me to believe a stranger came and connected our houses?" Tony crossed his arms and pondered again. Then he agreed. "Well, we should probably go and see it." And stood up. "But..." Nicola tried to stop him, flustered, but Tony asked Sam to show him to the outlet. The wire ran into a shed where it wasn't visible. After checking, Tony came back pale-faced. And immediately made Nicola apologize. "I'm sorry. Truly, I am." Nicola silently looked down. Like a child. According to Tony, the wiring was connected via an extension cord to a battery and Nicola's computer. The battery was bought when they moved in. She was advised to charge it during cheaper, nighttime rates, and using it during the day was cost-effective. Nicola had been doing exactly that. Initially, it was just that, but then she started plugging in her computer and other appliances since there were free sockets on the extension cord. Eventually, she used our electricity day and night. Nicola justified her actions by saying it was more cost-effective. It was infuriating enough that she had been stealing electricity, but even more so that she had looked down on me while lying all along. "You've been saying how pitiful Sam is for having a wife who can't save, or criticizing me for buying sweets while being unable to save. Remember? That's the truth, though." Her lack of remorse was almost impressive. "Saving by using someone else's electricity isn't saving. It's just a crime, I continued. And don't think we'll just let this go because we're family. If you sincerely apologize, that's one thing. But if you keep this attitude, we'll have to involve the police. Nicola looked surprised, as if she thought getting caught would be the end of it. What kind of daughter-in-law are you? To betray your own family? Don't talk like that. We just want you to make amends because we are family. As I reached for my phone, Nicola panicked and lunged at me. Sam quickly restrained her. There's no evidence. With everything laid out like this, you still need evidence? Let me tell you something conclusive. I pointed towards the roof. Nicola squinted, then realized. Yes, our house is equipped with security cameras, which happened to cover the area around the outlet. Nicola murmured a small, "Ah." Is this enough for you? And one more thing. There's more? The reason you were in such a hurry today was because of the release of limited edition suites, wasn't it? No way. I smiled. Yes. I had a friend get them for me, so I managed to secure them. If you hadn't been busy stealing electricity, you might have been able to get them on your computer, too. Too bad. Nicola trembled and then sat down on the spot. After discussing with Sam, we decided against reporting Nicola to the police. She had admitted to it, and we had evidence, but it was too much hassle, and being family, it might get brushed off. Instead, we decided to get a proper apology and compensation for the electricity from Tony and Nicola. It was awkward living so close, but it had to be done. Tony and Nicola, perhaps feeling awkward too, eventually moved back to their old house. Apparently, word got out about the electricity theft, and Nicola became the subject of rumors. Nicola was devastated and wanted to return to their original home. It turns out Nicola thought she was good at neighborhood relations. But in reality, people were just being polite. After paying us, Tony and Nicola were left with little money. But we would not help them. They needed to save on their own, especially on their beloved suites. As for me, now that Nicola is gone, I'm enjoying my life, deciding which suites to buy next with the electricity bill back to normal. Wait, are you trying to use the bathroom? Dirty old people are banned from using it. We use that toilet too, you know. If you guys use it, our brand new toilet will get dirty immediately, won't it? Sorry, but you'll have to make do with peeing in the bushes outside. Oh, and don't do it in the garden, okay? If you dirty our precious home even a little, I'll never forgive you. Both we were taken aback by Emily and Wilson's words. A bathroom ban? That's just unthinkable. No matter how much they dislike us, such behavior is inexcusable. We have endured harsh words from our son and his wife before. As we're the kind of people who dislike fights, we've always quietly accepted their treatment. But now, we've reached our limit. We need to make it clear what happens when they make enemies of us. I started plotting a scenario for revenge. I'm sure this plan will work. My name is Sarah, a 62-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband. I met Johnson, my husband, at the company where we used to work. After Johnson's persistent pursuit, we started dating and smoothly transitioned into marriage. I was blessed with a son with Johnson, a lively boy. We named him Wilson and raised him with care. Wilson grew up healthily and eventually found a job. He married a woman named Emily and built a family. I remember the feeling genuinely happy when he first introduced Emily to us. But that happiness didn't last long. Everything went awry when I realized why she had married him. After marriage, they lived with us. One day, Wilson and Johnson were out, and only Emily and I were at home. At first, we were chatting amicably in the living room, but then Emily's mobile phone rang. It seemed she received a call. Sorry, Sarah, it looks like it's from a friend. With that, she excused herself and went back to her room. Left alone in the living room, I decided to clean the house to pass the time. As I was passing Emily's room, I inadvertently overheard her conversation. Her voice was so loud that I couldn't help but hear. "Seriously, those old folks are living too long. If they suddenly died, we could get the inheritance. I'm married into the family for the president's fortune, but this is just hell." Her words felt like a cold shower to me. Actually, Johnson's father was the president of well-known top-tier company. However, the company was set to be inherited by his brother. Still, being part of the president's family, Johnson had some share of the wealth. It turned out Emily had married Wilson with that very intention in mind. They probably believed that once we passed away, the inheritance would become theirs. In fact, we had always treated Wilson and his wife with this in mind. Such behavior couldn't be tolerated. I shared this with Johnson that night. Initially, he was shocked, saying, "Really?" but he trusted my words. After discussing, we decided not to act immediately but to observe if Emily would reveal her true intentions. Maybe, in the meantime, she might change her attitude and start treating us like a real family. It was a decision made with the faint hope. But things didn't go as expected. To test Wilson and his wife, we observed their behavior. We invited them out, asked for help with chores, and so on. Gradually, they seemed to find us a nuisance, and their attitude changed. "Wilson, you're free now, right? I'm sorry to ask you, but can you give me a hand to do the laundry? My back hurts." One day, seeing Wilson relaxing in the living room, I asked him. Although Emily had been the one to speak harshly that day, Johnson suspected they might be in this together. We suspect that maybe Wilson feels in the same way. So, I started to approach Wilson to understand his feelings. At my request, Wilson looked up from his mobile phone, sighed with annoyance, and said, "Can't you do that yourself, Mom? You're a mother, after all. Shouldn't you be able to handle the household chores by yourself?" He then returned his gaze to his mobile phone. It became clear that he had no intention of helping. His attitude seemed to say, "I have no intention of being a family with you." This thought sent a chill down my spine. Don't say that. Family should help each other when in trouble. You have your own family now, Wilson. You need to act responsibly. My voice trembled, reflecting my fear. If my suspicions were true, it meant that even Wilson, whom we had lovingly raised, was betraying us. That was something I couldn't bear. Desperately, I pleaded, "Please help me." But Wilson didn't even look up from his phone or show any sign of getting up from the sofa. His unwillingness to help was evident. Persisting in my request, he let out a heavy sigh and continued. "Look," he continued, "enough is enough. Yes, you're my mother, but that doesn't give you the right to be selfish. I have a wife, Emily, and I need to work for her. I'm already exhausted every day, and now you're asking me to do chores too? That's cruel. Don't ask us to do such things anymore. We are essentially strangers." Essentially strangers. Those words pierced deeply into my heart. It confirmed my fears. Both Wilson and Emily seem to be after Johnson's inheritance. They seem indifferent to us, thinking as long as they receive the inheritance, that's all that matters. This betrayal from family deeply wounded me. Yet, we couldn't foresee something even worse. I immediately told Johnson about Wilson's possible intent for the inheritance. Johnson, seemingly already convinced. "I thought as much." He nodded. And so, our family dynamics became distorted. Amidst all this, Wilson and his wife decided to move out. When they brought it up, we couldn't help but feel relieved. By then, living with them had become unbearable. Even sharing the same house with them was distressing. They wanted to live in a new single-family home, which would require a significant amount of money. To hasten their move, we decided to provide financial assistance. "Dad, Mom, thanks. Family is indeed valuable." Knowing the underlying meaning of Wilson's words, we couldn't genuinely rejoice. The construction of their new house was completed, and it was the day of their move. They packed up some of their belongings and left the house. A week later, we visited their new home with a housewarming gift. Though I didn't want to go, I remembered my father-in-law teaching about maintaining certain courtesies, so I decided to endure it a bit. Nice house, isn't it? Smells like new construction. Their home was more beautiful than expected, probably due to the money spent on it. After being shown around various rooms, when we gave the celebration gift in the living room. "Thank you so much," she said. She seemed pleased as she put away the gift. While chatting in the living room, I felt the need to use the restroom. "Where's the bathroom? May I use it?" I said. To my request, Wilson and his wife responded unbelievably. "Wait, are you trying to use the bathroom? Dirty old people are banned from using it. We use that toilet too, you know. If you use it, our brand new toilet will get dirty immediately, won't it?" Followed by his words, "Sorry, but you'll have to make do with peeing in the bushes outside. Oh, and don't do it in the garden, okay? If you dirty our precious home even a little, I'll never forgive you." Their words made me feel dizzy. It was too cruel, regardless of how much they disliked us. At that moment, they were like strangers to me. There was no familial affection left. That's why I decided to start my revenge. I planned to ruin them thoroughly. I secretly devised a scenario for it. Exchanging glances with Johnson, who was just as stunned. It seemed Johnson was thinking the same as me. "We don't want to be a nuisance, and since we've given the housewarming gift, maybe we should leave if we're not wanted." There was no reason to stay in their house any longer. We had fulfilled our duty by giving a housewarming gift. If they were going to be that terrible to us, we didn't need to stay. Right. Our presence here only seems to bother them. It's better to leave now. I had anticipated being unwelcome, but to be told things like being banned from using the toilet or to go in the bushes was too much. "Yeah, leave right now. Don't want this house getting old and musty because of some old people. Don't stay any longer than necessary." Old people making the house musty? That's just absurd. Realizing how much my own son despised us was a bit of a shock. But I couldn't see Wilson as my son anymore. I'd deal with these conflicting feelings later. For now, the priority was to leave. "And don't come over unless absolutely necessary. We've got your gift, so you're of no use to us now. Maybe see you at the baby shower, but that's it." Even though she demanded us to leave right away, she still wants a gift. What greedy people. Though giving them gifts was burdensome, we were fortunately not short on money. So, to keep the peace and calm myself, I accepted it. "Then let's sever ties. If you despise us so much, it must be hard to continue as a family, right? Anything is fine with me as long as we don't have to deal with you and your family, who are troublesome." Are they high on their own anger? Emily quickly agreed to my suggestion, likely not understanding the consequences of her decision. We gathered our things and left Wilson's house. They hardly even saw us out. But this was just the beginning of our revenge. I couldn't wait to see them fall into the hell we were about to create. I can't help but look forward to that moment. Back home, I shared the revenge plan with Johnson. He said, "This is going to be interesting." He laughed and was in agreement with my plan. They say spouses become like mirrors of each other, and I really felt that was true. Since then, we had been very busy. To complete our revenge, various preparations were necessary. Before we knew it, about a week had passed. Despite being busy, we were leading a calm life without any major incidents with Wilson and his wife. But it seemed about time for a disruption. As I was expecting this, the phone rang. Johnson and I exchanged glances. Sure enough, it was Wilson on the line. I put the call on speaker so Johnson could hear and spoke to Wilson. "Hello, Wilson? What's up? Did something happen?" It was surprising he called so nonchalantly after what had happened. Normally, after such an incident, I'd think it would be awkward to make a phone call. But Wilson, sounding cornered and desperate, blurted out. "What's happened, you ask?" What have you two done? Thanks to you, I'm in a terrible situation. Do something about it now. Wilson's statement was disjointed, and I couldn't understand what he was talking about. Of course, I had orchestrated this revenge, so I could guess what might be happening to him. What exactly do you mean? Tell me everything from the start, I don't understand. Since I had no idea what he was accusing us of, I couldn't respond. Urging Wilson to explain, he started his story in an angry tone. It seemed the trouble started when he went to work after the incident. While working, Wilson noticed something unusual. The looks directed at him by his colleagues were unusually cold. Wilson, who tends to be overly concerned with others' perceptions, found it unbearable to stay at work and left early that day. Hoping it was just his imagination, he went to work again the next day, but the cold stares remained unchanged. He confronted a colleague about it, but all he got in response was, "Ask yourself." Just that, and they wouldn't tell me anything more. Furthermore, it wasn't just his department colleagues who were giving him cold stares. It seemed as if everyone in the company, from high-ranking superiors to colleagues in other departments, were looking at him with disdain. He felt as if every employee he encountered was regarding him with contempt. Despite racking his brain, Wilson couldn't think of a reason for the cold treatment at work. He hadn't made any mistakes on the job. Eventually, he surmised that my husband, Johnson, a member of the company's founding family, and I must have been involved. What have you two done? Because of you, I can't work anymore. You need to take responsibility. Wilson lashed out at us one-sidedly. Indeed, the frigid reception he faced wasn't a figment of his imagination, it was a part of our scheme. We had promptly informed my brother-in-law about the ordeal with Wilson and his wife. He values us greatly and was furious upon hearing it. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law isn't one to keep secrets. He inadvertently leaked our story to his secretary and other managerial staff. Soon enough, the entire company knew about their misdeeds, and everyone began to scorn Wilson. This is too much. Fix it now. I can't work in that kind of environment. Indeed, someone like him, who is easily swayed by others' opinions, couldn't possibly continue working in such a hostile environment. However, his employment was actually a result of nepotism. He had been lazy during his student days, lacking notable educational achievements or qualifications. Since he couldn't find a satisfactory job, his sympathetic uncle hired him at his company. Could someone like Wilson really manage a proper job search? From my perspective, it seemed unlikely. That company was his only option. Yet, working there under current circumstances was impossible for him. Please, you have to do something. I can't work under those stairs. You caused this, right? Then fix it, he yelled over the phone. But I had no intention of forgiving him. We've disowned you, remember? Why are you asking for help now? That was all Emily's doing. I always considered you and Dad as my family. Families are supposed to help each other, right? So, help me. Indeed, families should help each other. But he had misunderstood the meaning of family. You help because they are your family, not treat them as family only when help is needed. Feeling the conversation was pointless, I ended the call with him. Afterward, my phone kept ringing incessantly, so I blocked his number. That was how we completely severed ties with our own son. Our revenge was far from over. The day after our conversation with Wilson, my phone rang again. This time, it was Emily. Sarah, please open the entrance. I have something to discuss, including about Wilson. Let me in quickly. As soon as I answered the phone, she blurted out such things. It seemed that she, thinking it best to resolve matters directly, was waiting at the entrance of our house, eager to talk. Well, it was our former house, after all. Emily, we're not at that house anymore. Indeed, it was our former home. Since then, we had sold the house where we lived with them and moved to a new home. A brand new, sparkling single-family home. Our new home, chosen with a slightly competitive spirit, was more spacious and grander than Wilson and Emily's. What? Then where are you? Things are terrible here. If we don't know where you are, how can we receive the inheritance? Tell me your current address. She seemingly failed to comprehend the meaning of disownment. To disown means no longer being family. An inheritance is not passed to non-family members. We had even updated our will to ensure that, come what may, Wilson and his wife would not receive any inheritance. However, she appeared to misunderstand, thinking that if some family connection remained, they could still inherit. Emily, you can no longer receive any inheritance. We've disowned you, remember? We're no longer family. Why would we give an inheritance to someone who's not family? I was astonished at her lack of understanding. Her ignorance was so profound that it was almost laughable. Surprised by my response, she exclaimed. What? She exclaimed in a loud voice. What? I didn't know that. That's a real problem if we can't get the inheritance. Let's forget about the disownment, okay? We're still family, right? Her self-centeredness was astounding. It was baffling how someone could be so obsessed with money. Her illogical and selfish statements left me speechless. Misinterpreting my silence as agreement, she continued. How about we live together? You've moved out of this house, right? I just realized how lonely it is without you, Sarah. Our house is big, so you can live here too. Let's live together as a family. And yet, this was the same person who had once called us dirty old people and drove us out. Now she was even suggesting living together, clearly all for the sake of inheritance. It was obvious that restarting life with them was out of the question. I wondered if she even understood that. Could she really not understand even that? Sorry, but we'll have to decline. And from now on, please don't contact us. We've disowned you, so we're no longer family. And non-family members won't inherit anything. Please understand and give up. No! That's unacceptable! Please, Sarah, forgive us! When I firmly declared our disownment, Emily seemed to finally grasp its meaning and desperately clung to any hope. But my decision was final. And likely Johnson's as well. Therefore, I ended the call with her and immediately blocked her number. This way, she couldn't contact us again. They wouldn't know our current whereabouts. Essentially, we've completed our disownment. We felt a sense of relief, having cleanly severed this unpleasant connection. Later, I heard from acquaintances and brother-in-law that Wilson and Emily began fighting incessantly over the inheritance and their jobs, leading to a divorce. They argued bitterly over alimony and property division, even hiring lawyers and taking their disputes to court. After the divorce was finalized, Emily returned to her parents' home. She seemed certain that her biological parents would accept her, but when they actually saw her and learned of the situation, they were furious. Apparently, she was promptly kicked out of the house. Wilson, having quit his job, struggled to find new employment and is now working tirelessly in part-time roles to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Johnson and I are enjoying a peaceful and happy life. The weight of the Wilson affair lifted, we've found newfound freedom. We're planning to go on a trip soon, taking brother-in-law and his wife along. Johnson and I have been making plans for this trip together. It's our way of thanking him for his help in our revenge. We are carefully planning this vacation. Family is about supporting each other and helping in times of need. But that doesn't always mean being related by blood. Some, like Wilson and Emily, disregard even their own family. This incident has deeply ingrained that lesson in us. Hey, cruel wife! How many times do I have to tell you? The fork. There's no fork. Are you telling me to eat lunch with my hands? What a ridiculous, cruel wife. After our child was born, my husband started calling me a cruel wife occasionally. Why did I marry this man? I could hardly remember. Before we got married, I thought I liked him because he was kind and considerate. It was often said that women would change after getting married and having children. But I would ask this. What about men who don't change at all even after having kids? Isn't that somehow strange? Fed up with my mounting irritation, I shouted back at my husband on the phone. Shut up! If there's no fork, then eat with your hands. Even a baby can eat with their hands, why can't you? My name is Carol, a 36-year-old office worker. By the way, I am currently on parental leave. Though in a different department, my husband Kent was a colleague at the same company. Kent, a responsible and respected manager, was our team leader. After dating for 3 years, we got married. We were both busy with work, but we spent our days off together and had a reasonably happy life. However, I began to have certain troubles as I got older. When will you guys let me see my grandchild? These were the words of Louis, who is Kent's dad, as my father-in-law. Every time he looked at me and said this, I get sick to my stomach. I don't like Louis, or rather I hate him. He's arrogant and acts so pompous. Louis was a department head in a fairly large company. He may be a man in positions of authority, but I always think that it just at work and doesn't apply at home. I often saw him scolding mother-in-law Deanna. When I told Kent, he said, "My parents have always been like that. They haven't divorced, so it must be working out, right?" He talked about it as if it was none of his business, which made me wonder if this was really okay. We got married when I was 28, but we didn't have children for a while. About 2 years into our marriage, we started to think it might be difficult to conceive naturally, so we went to the hospital together. The test results revealed there was something wrong with Kent. What? You mean I'm the cause? Really? Kent couldn't believe what the doctor said. Even after getting a second opinion at 2 other hospitals, the results were the same. All I could do was to try to cheer up the disheartened Kent, saying, "The doctor said there's still a chance. I'll do my best too." Looking back, maybe Kent didn't even like these words from me. After that, we started treatment, which was quite tough. Not only was it physically tough, but it was also mentally taxing. Every time I passed a pregnant woman with a big belly at the OBGYN, I kept thinking, why can't I have a baby? Every time I saw Louis during this time, he asked repeatedly, "Hasn't my grandchild been born yet?" Deanna was always kind to me, encouraging me not to worry. "Dad is such a problem. I've explained to him that I'm the cause, but..." Ken said in disgust. The treatment was hard, but back then, I hadn't even considered divorcing Kent. Then, when I was 35, I finally conceived our long-awaited baby. Even Louis was pleased, saying, "Really? I was starting to give up hope, but now I'll finally be a granddad." His words were excessive, but he seemed happy. Deanna also told me to take care of myself. What surprised us even more was that I was expecting twins. There was some anxiety about suddenly becoming a mother of 2, but Kent said, "Let me know anything I can do, I'll do anything." As might be expected of twins, by the time I passed the 6-month mark, my belly was as big as if I was at full term. By then, we knew both were boys. But there was anxiety as well as joy. This one is growing well, but the other hasn't grown much since last time. The doctor sometimes told me at checkups. I prepared myself for a smaller birth and prayed for their safe growth every day. Being pregnant with twins, I was able to start my maternity leave early. Kent had been promoted to manager around that time, perhaps in recognition of his hard work. But with his new responsibilities, he started coming home later and using work as an excuse. "Hey, can't you come home a bit earlier? It's getting hard to move around with my big belly," I said. His response was, "What can I do? It's work. I'll do my best once they're born." Thankfully, Deanna, who lives nearby, often came to check on me. I always thought Deanna was a quiet person, but she talked a lot when it was just the 2 of us. "How are you feeling, Carol? I made this because you said it was delicious before. Eat up. And I bought some daily necessities for you. Deanna, you're really a godsend." Thanks to Deanna, I could lead a calm life during my pregnancy. I'm truly grateful even now. Later, I gave birth to fraternal twin boys via C-section. My eldest son, Rui, was 5 pounds, and my second son, Ray, was 4.5 pounds. Kent and I had already decided on their names together. I was discharged from the hospital after about a week, but the boys couldn't come home due to their low weight. On the day of my discharge, Kent came to pick me up. I was depressed, but he said, "Think of it as a chance to rest for a while. Let's be positive." Frustrated by Kent's off-the-mark comment, my irritation peaked when I got home. "What is this?" The house was a mess, the table cluttered with stuff, and the sink overflowed with dishes. Even Kent realized it was bad and said, "I was going to clean up, but I've been busy with work, and on my days off, I'm too tired and sleep in, and I thought, you're coming back today anyway." Realizing he expected me to clean up made me more sad than angry. "Kent, didn't you say you'd step up once the kids were born?" "Of course, I'll help with anything I can. But the kids are still in the hospital, so I thought it's okay to start helping once they're back," he said with a careless laugh. I just told him to look up how to care for someone postpartum and locked myself in the bedroom. A few minutes later, he quietly opened the door. "Sorry, Carol. I looked up how to care for someone after giving birth. You're right, I shouldn't make you strain yourself. Rest easy today. Starting tomorrow, you'll just do as much as you can." With a smug face, he left the room. What does he mean by starting tomorrow, you'll just do as much as you can? It seemed Kent still didn't understand the meaning of rest. Perhaps I could have relied on my parents, but my brother and his wife lived there, and their eldest child was a student preparing for exams then. When I told about my pregnancy, that night my sister-in-law messaged, "Are you planning to come to our parents' home after giving birth? Please keep it short if possible, since our eldest son is studying for exams." I might have said the same if I were in her shoes. My mom was supposed to help me after my discharge, but she fractured her leg falling down the stairs the day before I was discharged. Considering Kent's behavior today, he probably won't be of much help. But the next day, my savior appeared. "Congratulations on your discharge, Carol. When Kent told me you needed help, I wondered what happened. Rely on me for anything," she said. To me, Deanna seemed like a goddess. Since I needed to breastfeed, Deanna drove me to the hospital every day. Once I asked Kent to deliver pumped breast milk to the hospital because of feeling unwell, he said, "Me? Impossible, I'll be late for work. I'll tell Mom," and left for work quickly. Kent always left inconvenient tasks to others. Kent will surely do more once childcare starts, and I need to try harder too. At that time, I still had the energy to think that way. A month after giving birth, my son's discharge was arranged. I was overjoyed at the thought of finally living together. On the day we brought the boys home, Louis visited and said, "This one is quite small, is he okay? Compared to him, this one looks healthy." He ignored quiet and smaller Ray, only doting on Rui. "What's with this old man? Enough already." I prayed the boys wouldn't get attached to Louis. Taking care of twins was far beyond my imagination. Feeding was doubled and they rarely slept at the same time. One of them was always awake. When both cried at the same time, I almost panicked. Deanna came almost every day, and my mom, whose leg was getting better, also visited regularly. Without these two mothers, I might have collapsed. Deanna and Mom seemed to get along well. "We'll take care of Rui and Ray, so you should sleep while you can," they insisted, pushing me into the bedroom. I managed during the day, but the problem was at night. Kent, who said he'd do his best once the kids were born, hadn't changed. He still came home late, and by the time he arrived, I had finished bathing the babies. The most he did was admire the twins' cute sleeping faces. "They're so cute." He often made them wake up by touching their cheeks. When they woke up and cried, the other would join in. "Hey! They just fell asleep after so much effort. Don't mess it up." I snapped. You get angry like that again. Carol, you've been too irritable since having the babies. Remember, they can see you. He joked. Huh. It's your fault. I became upset as Kent complained and quickly headed for a shower. Kent ate the meals I made whenever he wanted to eat, and took a bath I prepare whenever he wanted to take. And he slept and woke up at his own convenience. Even when the kids cry, he never seems to hear them and remains asleep. It's the same with diaper changing. He does change them if I ask, albeit awkwardly. However, when it's poop, he stubbornly refuses, exclaiming, "Whoa! Carol, come here." Rui pooped, so change his diaper quickly. What does he mean by doing his best? Is this it? That can't be true, right? I felt like I wasn't co-parenting with Kent. I would have collapsed if it weren't for Mom and Deanna. When I was pregnant with the twins, I begged Kent many times to take paternity leave. I asked, but it's difficult. It's a pity, but I'll do my best when I get home from work, he said. And this was the result. Furthermore, Kent told me, at my company, no man takes parental leave. The wives of my colleagues make lunch every day. Professional moms are different, huh? Before giving birth, I used to make Kent's lunch every day. I didn't have time for that since the twins came, so he had to buy lunch or eat out. Kent seemed annoyed by this, and I felt his sarcasm. By then, my love for Kent had completely cooled. Could anyone still love their husband in this situation? Maybe it's time for a divorce. He hardly contributes to household chores, just complains. But raising twins alone, that's unsettling. I hesitated to take the step towards divorce, especially with the twins still so small. Meanwhile, the boys grew steadily. Rui remained a bit smaller but eagerly drank both formula and breast milk. By 6 months, they could almost grow to average size. We started weaning. I learned recipes from Mom and Deanna, read books, and tried many things myself. Despite being twins, their food preferences were different, which was fun. Looking at the mushy baby food, Kent said, "Wow, how can they eat this? Looks disgusting." While saying that and feeding our son, I intervened. "Enough. I'll take over." To which he replied, "Why can you only talk to me like that? I'm doing my best in my own way. Carol, you like a cruel wife. Be a little nicer to me, I feel suffocated." His words brought tears to my eyes. Is it my fault? I'm trying hard, aren't I? That night, I thought to myself, maybe I had been too harsh on Kent. I felt a little remorse. To apologize, I made lunch for Ken the next day for the first time in a long time. Kent seemed happy and a little embarrassed. I made Kent lunch today, he was shyly happy about it. I told Deanna, who was at my house, and she responded, "Thanks for doing that for Kent, but you should let him buy his own lunch. He should be making it himself." We laughed about how Lewis would dislike that, and just then, my mobile phone rang. "Maybe it's a thank you call for the lunch?" Excited, I answered. "Where's the fork?" Kent's yelling echoed in my ears. "Sorry, what?" I responded. "Hey, cruel wife. How many times do I have to tell you? The fork. There's no fork in the lunch. Are you telling me to eat with my hands? What a ridiculous cruel wife." As I fell silent, he said to me, "Is this payback for yesterday? You really have a bad attitude. Bring me a fork in 5 minutes." I felt bad about forgetting the fork. But did he need to be told this much? At that moment, I stopped seeing this man as family. Maybe it was too late, even by my own standards. My anger welled up and it reached its peak. Without regard to Deanna being next to me, I shouted, "Shut up! If there's no fork, then eat with your hands. Even a baby can eat with their hands, why can't you?" Perhaps Kent didn't expect such a reaction and said, We're getting a divorce, that's it with you, the cruel wife. We'll talk when I get home. And hung up. I glanced at Deanna, who had an unexpected reaction. Kent came home very early that night, perhaps finishing work at a normal time. Behind him, Louis and Deanna were there. Louis sat down arrogantly and demanded, "Hey, coffee!" Thinking it was probably the last time I'd see this uncle, I silently made coffee. I've heard most of it from Kent. Aren't you being a bit too selfish? Louis spoke to me arrogantly as usual, laughing at the idea of a housewife being so bossy. I was an office worker, just on parental leave, but I didn't feel like explaining. I said, "Really?" I just get so irritated with Kent, who shows no responsibility or awareness as a father after the birth of our children. Louis sighed. Men are like that. I was the same. It can't be helped. You're the reason we couldn't have grandchildren for so long, yet you haven't apologized to our family? Huh? What did this man just say? So that's why he was so harsh on me. Kent looked uneasy next to Louis, who demanded an apology. Really? That's a lie from Kent. The issue lies with your son. I pulled out Kent's medical results and slammed them in front of Louis. Even Louis was taken aback and accused him. Carol, I'm sorry. I said those things, but I don't really want a divorce. I apologize for lying about the test results. I just couldn't believe them. Kent apparently didn't want a divorce. He probably thought bringing Louis and Deanna would work in his favor. I quietly handed him the divorce papers. A joke, right? Rui and Ray are still so young. You want to make them poor fatherless children? Better fatherless than with a father like you. You're always lying, Kent. You never change, always saying you'll do your best. When have you done? I'm tired too. Let me be free. And, you think I don't know anything? Kent looked confused. A lot of people at your company heard today's call. It's embarrassing. A colleague called me, worried. That's when I heard about the parental leave. You said you didn't need it, all lies. Concerned about me with the twins, Kent's boss had asked to him, "How long will you take for maternity leave?" Despite that, Kent had declined. It was also revealed that Kent could have left work on time on some days, but he deliberately stayed late. Kent was silent and downcast at my words. Seeing this, Louis intervened. Well, you know, men have their own circles. Supporting that is a wife's role. You'll understand eventually. He looked at Deanna as if seeking agreement. Deanna scoffed at Louis. That's something I'll never understand, no matter how many years pass. Louis was taken aback by her reaction. Ignoring Louis, Deanna said, Kent, let Carol go. Make sure to pay proper child support. That's the least you can do. Not expecting this from Deanna, Kent looked helplessly at Louis. Then, Louis suggested something outrageous. If you divorce, leave one child here. The bigger one, yes, that one. Pointing at our eldest son, Rui. I was so angry that I almost hit Louis. Then Deanna slapped Louis, shouting, "Enough already!" Louis was shocked and exclaimed, What have you done? We might as well divorce too." As if waiting for these words, Deanna said, "Really? Thank you. Then please sign here." I've already done. 2 divorce papers were laid out on the table. The 2 men remained silent and seemed to be thinking. This wasn't supposed to happen. After Kent yelled at me on the phone, Deanna chuckled and said, Kent grew up watching Louis treated women poorly. A foolish husband and a foolish son, pathetic. Carol, I've reached my limit too. The end of a man who can't do anything alone must be ridiculous, don't you think? Let's make them regret it. I felt a bit scared seeing Deanna's face, but realized she must have endured worse treatment for a long time. Kent and Louis filled out the divorce papers while saying, "Regret this." and handed them over as if throwing them. They frustrated me till the end, but Deanna and I were finally free. I returned to my parents' home. My brother's family had moved nearby, so their children could attend a local high school. Deanna, having received her share of the assets, moved close to my parents' home. She's become quite close with my mom and visits her often. The boys are happy, loved by their two grandmothers. As for Kent, the fork incident became widely known at work, and he lost respect, especially among female colleagues, being whispered about as a women's enemy. He's unlikely to engage in office romance again. Due to his poor domestic skills, he's been demoted from his manager position, as customers complained about his sloppy, unhygienic appearance. His diet has deteriorated, and he's gained weight. Feeling uncomfortable, he recently requested a transfer. By the time I return from parental leave, Kent won't be at the same company. Similarly, Lewis's personal life suffered. He tried to make this incident a laughing matter with his superiors over drinks, but the room fell silent. The way I see it, a man who can't treasure his family isn't worth much. The CEO personally told him, so Lewis's remaining months until retirement will be uncomfortable. He'll likely spend his old age alone. Both got what they deserved. Deanna started part-time work at a nearby grocery store and seems to be enjoying her days. I'm happy for her. The twins, Rui and Ray, are about to celebrate their first birthday. A few days ago, the two of them started walking at the same time. I was so moved that I couldn't help but burst into tears. They have different food preferences, but they like the same toys and are now playfully fighting over them, saying ah. Ah. Watching them, I vowed to be a strong mother.
What should we make for the New Year's feast? It's that time of year again. My name is Sherry, a 31-year-old working professional. Many of my female colleagues have left the company for marriage or childbirth, leaving just one single woman and one married woman like myself. New young employees keep coming in, and the three of us joke that we are already the senior ladies at our age. I have made it to a supervisor role, but climbing any higher seems challenging. Still, I'm content with my current situation, working for a stable company, earning a decent salary, and having a good time with my colleagues. My husband Kevin is 2 years younger than me but is climbing the corporate ladder smoothly and is well regarded by his bosses. Both of us have full-time jobs, and since we don't have kids yet, we're living a fairly comfortable life. That said, we're usually frugal, except for special occasions like vacations or birthdays. Neither of us are into brand name stuff, and we don't have many material desires. Preparing for having a child and enjoying life together if you don't have children, I vaguely think like that and save money. As soon as Halloween ended and the city switched to Christmas decorations, I started thinking about the new year. Every year, Kevin and I prepare a New Year's feast and drinks to bring to my in-laws. For some reason, that's become the norm. The first New Year's after getting married, my mother-in-law asked me to pick up a ham she had ordered. Turns out she hadn't paid for it yet. I gave her the ham, but she didn't mention the money. I figured she would settle up later, but that never happened. When my husband casually asked her about it, she said she was busy and would deal with it later. Then, when my husband wasn't around, she said, "You can at least pay for the ham, right? I mean, we're the ones preparing for New Year's here." I wouldn't have minded paying, but the way she said it without even a thank you was annoying. We had already bought drinks and snacks as she had asked, and even brought New Year's gift. It's an hour away by car, so I can't stay overnight, so I wonder what preparations are needed. If she had said she was making a homemade feast, I would have been impressed, but she had just bought stuff from the store and there were no New Year's decorations. I convinced myself that hosting is hard work and let it go. The next year, she asked us to bring not just drinks and snacks, but also the New Year's feast. We complied, thinking it's only a few times a year we visit. My husband's parents, us, and his sister and her husband were all there. They ate so much, it was no wonder they were that size. The feast was gone in no time, and I barely got any. "Next time, bring more. We are here for 3 days. This isn't enough." "Oh, this seems a bit scant, don't you think? Make sure to bring more next time." "Yeah." When I give a non-committal nod, overwhelmed by their energy, my husband gives me an apologetic look. You see, my sister-in-law and her husband never bring any gifts when they visit, not even for New Year's. They guzzle down drinks like water, never bring even a can of beer, and don't give anything to either our parents or us. On the other hand, I always prepare New Year's gifts for my in-laws and my sister-in-law's family. According to my husband, his mom has always doted on my sister-in-law. She would take her everywhere, buy her anything she wanted, totally spoiled her. Maybe that's why they think they don't have to bring anything. I'm also surprised that my brother-in-law could act so nonchalant about it. They relax without bringing any gift, indulge in the food and drinks we have prepared, and don't even offer to help clean up. I couldn't even imagine being so inconsiderate, and my husband would definitely offer to help if he were at my parents' house. "My dear, just relax and sit," my mom would say. But I appreciate my husband's willingness when he asks, "Is there anything I can do?" Last New Year's, we had some crabs sent from relatives in Alaska. Since there was too much for just us, we took it to my in-laws and it was a hit.
You are really doing it, sis. This is how you do crab?
My sister-in-law was ecstatic. I knew they would probably eat most of it, so I brought the crab in the shell. Peeling crab shells is something I'm good at. My relatives used to send them to my parents. As we sat at the dinner table, I quickly peeled the crab for my husband and me. Not being accustomed to it, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family struggled to keep up. Eventually, my mother-in-law told my father-in-law to hurry up and peel, and my sister-in-law reached for our plate.
Sis, you're so good at this. Can you put some on my plate next?
And so, without even objecting, I became the designated crab peeler for my sister-in-law and her husband. Even when my husband said, "You're not kids, do it yourself," they didn't care. What's worse, not a single thank you was heard from them. Then, as if they really liked it, they even said,
"Looking forward to more crab next year."
But it seems this season's catch wasn't good, according to my mom. For this year's New Year feast, I was thinking of this. What do you think? I showed my husband a catalog. A restaurant in Minnesota collaborated with a department store to sell New Year's meals for the first time. "Thanks for always doing this, but my parents won't appreciate it. Let's go for something cheaper. This looks pretty expensive." I do agree, but I also don't want to bring something that's just abundant but not tasty. You never know what snide remarks you'll get, and I want my quiet father-in-law and kind husband to enjoy something good. I'm fed up with my rude mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but it's New Year's after all. If it leads to a good time, then that's all the better. That thought was still in my mind. Plus, I have some good news this time, which I explained to Kevin. The Minnesota restaurant that's making this New Year's feast, it's where my friend Mary got married. You remember her from the wedding. Oh, Sherry's best friend from high school. That's right, she came all the way from Minnesota. Yeah, I would love to visit her restaurant someday, so I've been wooed by this department store for 2 years to supply them with New Year's dishes. Turns out they are a bit anxious, so they're giving a 30% discount to family. Oh, really? So we're included in that deal? Yes. She said it's a special offer. Plus, it's not just about the discount, they're also looking for feedback, so we'll fill out a survey afterwards. Got it. Well, let's take advantage of that for this new year. And then it was New Year's Day. The New Year's feast, drinks and snacks were packed and ready to go. The takeout boxes for the New Year's feast were nearly twice the usual size. When Mary heard about our situation, she said they offer extra large boxes. The whole thing weighed almost 13 pounds. Even loading it in the car required some care. Last year, we got stuck in a traffic jam, so we decided to leave early. The roads were empty, so we arrived sooner than usual. As we rang the doorbell, my father-in-law came out to greet us. We said our New Year's greetings and went inside, but my mother-in-law was nowhere to be found. My father-in-law said apologetically, "She might still be sleeping. I did call her, but she didn't come down." Is she feeling unwell? No, that's not it. It wasn't the crack of dawn or anything, but here we were, ready to celebrate New Year's. And she's still sleeping after telling us to prepare all this? I couldn't help but be annoyed. It's more frustrating than frustrating. We exchanged glances and sighed, deciding that complaining wouldn't help. I took over making the coffee from my father-in-law. I knew where everything was because my mother-in-law always asked me to do it. My sister-in-law probably had no idea. My father-in-law was different from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, much calmer. Talking to him was comforting. My kind and soothing husband must take after him. They looked alike when they smiled too. As we enjoyed tea with my husband and father-in-law, I felt at ease for the first time at my in-laws. That's it. I decided to let my father-in-law, who rarely eats properly, enjoy the New Year's feast. I began to unpack the takeout boxes. My husband seemed to catch on and brought plates. This year's spread looks luxurious, Sherry. I'm sorry, you're always the one doing all the work. Don't worry about it, father-in-law. This is the New Year's feast from a restaurant in Minnesota. Wow, that's exciting. With all this food, I'll have to give you a proper thank you this year. Huh? Both my husband and I blinked, not understanding. Uh-huh? My father-in-law looked back at us, equally puzzled. About 10 minutes later,
Oh, Kevin, you're already here?
we heard heavy footsteps on the stairs and my mother-in-law appeared. She looked even larger than when we had seen her last summer. We were in the middle of New Year's greetings when we heard a car pull up. Seems like my sister-in-law and her family had arrived.
Mom, we're here.
My stepsister burst through the front door with enthusiasm.
Happy New Year!
Even though I greet her, she ignores the New Year's pleasantries and says,
Hey, you bought it this year too, right?
She looks at me with sparkling eyes. I bite my tongue, wanted to say a lot, and turn my attention to the New Year's feast. This year, I ordered some special New Year's dishes like Willy Bird turkey from Minnesota. As soon as I say that, both my mother-in-law and stepsister let out a disappointed, "What?"
No crab. It's New Year's, so of course there should be traditional New Year's dishes. What about crab or oysters?
I'm stunned by her words. I have gone to great lengths to prepare this and not even a thank you. I have chosen quality dishes for the New Year's feast. Plus, I have even upsized everything because you all eat so much. My patience is wearing thin, recalling my earlier conversation with my father-in-law. Before I can retort, my sister-in-law plops down and starts eating from the plate I had set aside for my father-in-law, saying,
Well, I'll give it a taste test for now.
Her husband sits next to her. Is the concept of manners foreign to these people?
Let's dig in. It looks delicious.
My mother-in-law follows suit.
Ah, this roast turkey is yummy. The lobster is huge too. Not bad at all.
They devour the food at an incredible pace. Dad, Sherry, let's eat too? My husband suggests, so I decide to calm down for now. My father-in-law hasn't started eating yet, and I want him to enjoy the food before it's gone. I also want to share our impressions with our close friend Mary. As I reach for the roast turkey, my stepsister snatches it away. Hey, I've told her countless times not to take other people's things, but she never learns. Well, I don't think so.
Are you hungry too, sister-in-law? But I'm definitely not sharing this turkey. You broke your promise to bring crab, so it's only fair.
My mother-in-law just laughs along. Snap! Something inside me just broke. Really? Is that so? Enough. I'm not feeding these people anymore. Just then, a moment before I could move, my husband said in a rare, intimidating voice, "Enough is enough." Startled by his tone, my sister-in-law hesitated for a moment. "Let's go, Sherry." He began to pack up the takeout boxes. He started putting the food, which had been laid out on large plates for easy access, back into its original containers. I followed suit silently.
Well, what are you doing? What's going on with you two?
My sister-in-law and mother-in-law started to panic, but it was too late. While I was closing the lid of the takeout boxes and putting them in a bag, my husband began to gather the drinks and snacks he had brought. We hadn't planned this, but our teamwork was spot on. All that was left was to load the car. I turned around and said with a smile, Well, we are going back to our parents' house. We won't be coming here for the holidays or the New Year anymore."
What?
My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were stunned. "That's how it is. Dad, I'll be in touch." My father-in-law nodded silently. As we were about to leave with our stuff,
Wait, why are you taking everything? Yeah, what are you thinking? You can leave if you want, but leave the food.
My mother-in-law and sister-in-law persisted.
Sherry, is this how you treat your husband's family? Kevin is such a kind person. He would never do something like this. What have you been telling him?
They were so hypocritical. If that's how it's going to be, I will set the record straight in front of them. I looked squarely at my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, as I mentioned earlier, the New Year's feast this year was ordered from a restaurant in Minnesota.
So what?
Don't you care about the price?
Why should I? You guys bought it, so it's none of my business.
Then where did the money that my father-in-law provided go?
What?
My mother-in-law covered her mouth as if she had just realized something. Every year, it seems my father-in-law has been providing money for the meals we bring, but we have never accepted it. Where did that money go? My mother-in-law must have thought she would never get caught since she had been successfully stealing the money every year. She turned pale.
What are you talking about?
Are you still going to pretend you don't know? You have no idea how shocked we were when we heard it from my father-in-law. My father-in-law was just as shocked. He only found out that we hadn't received a single cent when he saw the puzzled look on our faces. He had never intervened when his wife and daughter treated us poorly because he thought he was covering the costs. Even though we brought the food, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law ate it with such arrogance. My father-in-law didn't say a word because he thought he was the one paying for it. What's going on? I've been giving you 2 extra money every year, including for transportation, haven't I? My usually mild-mannered father-in-law raised his voice.
Well, you see...
My mother-in-law was at a loss for words, her eyes darting around. Do you have any idea how much effort it takes to pick and bring the food each time? You were asleep just a moment ago, weren't you?
Well, that's...
Yet every New Year's, we try to make everyone happy. It's not just about the money. What really hurts is that you can't even say thank you. My mother-in-law mumbled, and my sister-in-law looked pale behind her. I had a hunch about her. You knew about the money Dad prepared, didn't you? In fact, you have been using it for yourself. I hit the nail on the head. Given how much my mother-in-law dotes on her, it's entirely possible. What did you say?
No, it's not me, it's Mom.
My sister-in-law was flustered under my father-in-law's glare. We had no more business here. Let's go, Sherry. Okay, goodbye. We loaded our stuff into the car and drove off without looking back.
Wait, what are we going to do for New Year's? We can share some roast turkey with you.
I thought I heard that from behind, but I didn't look back. Sherry at this point, she's so clueless. My husband's timing was perfect and I burst out laughing after that. We had a great time at my parents' house for New Year's. We all enjoyed a feast from the restaurant where my best friend Mary works. My mom even gave her thoughts on each dish, so I took detailed notes. When I compiled it all, it turned into something like a report. We sent that along with a survey we received and later got an unexpected gift. Mary's family was delighted with our detailed comments and found our differing tastes interesting. They even sent us an invitation to their famous restaurant in Minnesota. It was nice to be invited, but even nicer to see how much Mary is loved. It warmed my heart to know my best friend is happy in her new home. As for my husband Kevin's family, my mother-in-law had indeed been using the money from my father-in-law for herself. She told him she had given it to us, and she and my sister-in-law had been enjoying lavish lunches at fancy hotels. Most of it seemed to be spent on extravagant meals. And get this, more of my mother-in-law's financial misdeeds came to light, and that gentle father-in-law of mine was furious. She had underestimated him, thinking he wouldn't make a big deal out of it. Now she's facing divorce. I was a bit shocked to hear this, that calm and kind father-in-law of mine. But maybe it's precisely because he's like that he couldn't forgive not giving money to his son and daughter-in-law. Courtesy matters even among family, and saying thank you and sorry is basic. Neither was present in my mother-in-law or sister-in-law. If we had been greeted with a smile and a thank you every year, and if we all could have enjoyed the meal together, the money wouldn't have mattered. My sister-in-law and her husband, despite their low income, had been living beyond their means and relying on my father-in-law for support. Now he's declared he won't give them another cent. My husband said while reporting all this, "Hey, I still want to have a father-son relationship with Dad going forward. Is that okay with you, Sherry?" "Absolutely," I answered without hesitation. It's too bad we couldn't share our New Year's feast with him. Oh, since we got that invitation, how about we invite him when we go to the restaurant? Great idea. He would love that. Dad's a big ice hockey fan, so he would have plenty to see in Minnesota. Believe it or not, watching sports is a hobby of his. Really? My dad loves ice hockey too. Our conversation kept flowing. Maybe our fathers would hit it off like this too. Why not invite my parents and take a trip to Minnesota with everyone? The thought made me feel happy.
Hello there, I'm Alice, a 32-year-old woman. Right now, I'm 9 months pregnant. On this day, my husband and I are driving over to his family's home. It's a mere 30-minute drive from the apartment where we live. It's not far at all, so we tend to visit 2 or 3 times a month. Today, we decided to make a trip after hearing that my mother-in-law was baking her famous apple pie. She's a very sweet lady. After the loss of her husband last year, she was really down and didn't know what to do. But she's recovered now, eagerly waiting for the birth of her grandchild. However, not everyone is thrilled about us having a child. One of those people is my sister-in-law, Brianna. According to mother-in-law, Brianna married 6 years before us, but so far there are no signs of her being pregnant. She even started fertility treatments 2 years ago, but still no baby. With all the pressure from around, she's become quite irritable lately. Mother-in-law had asked us to avoid meeting Brianna as much as possible, so we always tried to visit when she wasn't around. But on this day, to our surprise, Brianna showed up unexpectedly. Well, long time no see, Alice. You've put on some weight, haven't you? You're not just lazing around at home because you're pregnant, right? You look like a seal, all round and ready to roll down a hill. I was dumbfounded by her immediate and sharp remark. Hey sis, how can you say something like that right off the bat? She's 9 months pregnant. Of course her belly's gonna be big. You're gonna make enemies with pregnant women all over the world talking like that. My husband quickly jumped to my defense, leaving me speechless. Oh, please, I'm just thinking about Alice, okay? It's tough if a pregnant woman gets too heavy, you know? I just want Alice to be aware of her responsibilities as a mother. She claimed she was just thinking about me. I knew well enough that arguing back would only cause more problems. Thank you, sister-in-law. Yes, you're right. I should be more careful. I chose non-confrontational words, but she huffed and said, just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can be lazy. So start cleaning this house right now. You're lacking exercise, right? You can at least do that much. She then handed me a broom and dustpan she had picked up from nearby and demanded that I clean. But after being scolded by my mother-in-law and my husband for harassing me, she sulked and secluded herself in an upstairs room. I'm sorry, Alice. She just showed up at the house all of a sudden. I told her to leave. Mother-in-law apologized with a regretful look on her face. It's fine, mother-in-law. I'm not bothered. I'm sorry, Alice. That's just how my sister is. My husband also apologized along with mother-in-law. After that, we spent a pleasant time together, enjoying the apple pie mother-in-law had made and sipping on tea. We called out to Brianna too, but there was no response. Although we were worried, she never showed up in the end. However, I had no idea that a shocking incident would occur just a few days later. It happened when I went to my in-laws' house alone because I needed to speak with mother-in-law. As I wondered why the front door was unlocked, I discovered Brianna in the living room. Sister-in-law, what brings you here? I heard from mother-in-law that you had to work today. I wasn't in the mood, so I took the day off. And I was surprised to see you here. You disrupted my cleaning last time. Now please, get back to work. With that, she thrust the broom and dustpan back at me. I decided to clean as much as I could to avoid any trouble. But that day, I was feeling discomfort from early morning, and during the cleaning, I began to feel pain in my stomach. Just as I thought of taking a short break, my sister-in-law kicked my stomach, which resulted in my water breaking. The pain escalated, and I fell down on the spot. It hurts! Somebody, please help! I took out my mobile phone from my pocket and quickly dialed mother-in-law. The baby is in trouble. I managed to utter these words before losing consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm, and my body was wrapped in an electric blanket. Where am I? Wait, what about my baby? I tried to sit up, but the pain in my abdomen stopped me. Not only that, my stomach, which was supposed to be large, had shrunk, and I was shocked. I pressed the nurse call button, and when the nurse came, I asked what had happened. Apparently, my water had broken, and I had to give birth via emergency cesarean. The baby was small and therefore in an incubator, but was said to be in good health. Mother-in-law and my husband, who had rushed in, were also informed by the doctor. Their faces were red with anger. I decided to visit the baby once I felt better, and tried to sleep as much as possible to recover quickly. However, the next day, an unbelievable person showed up in my room. It was my sister-in-law, who had kicked me, and her husband. They walked into the room without even knocking. I frowned at their impudence. And when the two absurd people suggested, "We'll pay you. Let's settle this," I felt a chill. When I didn't agree, they lashed out at me with every offensive word they could think of towards my tired face from the cesarean operation. Thinking that my daughter had to go through such a thing because of these people, something inside me snapped. "A settlement? Are you kidding me? Don't make me laugh. I'll ruin your life." The two of them were enraged by my words and continued to shout at me. What are you saying? We're offering a solution with money here. Aren't you thankful? Alice, didn't your parents teach you to obey your elders? We're telling you to settle. Just agree, quietly. My brother-in-law also joined in, and as we were arguing, forgetting it was a hospital room, the door suddenly swung open, loudly. "I've heard everything. I'm sorry, but I have absolutely no intention of settling." My husband has a good build and is tall, so his deep voice was imposing. They didn't seem to expect my husband to show up, and the two who were talking so confidently until now were completely taken aback. "Ah, long time no see, Finn. It's a coincidence to meet you here." My brother-in-law said this, but his face seemed tense. "It truly is a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet you here, and I never imagined I'd hear such words from you two. I would appreciate an explanation." We were all in the room when they said it, so there's no room for any excuses. "Hey, don't be so angry, Finn. It's not like we had ill intentions. We just feel bad for what we did to Alice. That's why we're offering money, hoping to settle this out of court." My sister-in-law explained with a trembling voice, but my husband's fury didn't subside. "The one who decides whether this will be a settlement or not is Alice, not you. Besides, do you think this is a situation that can be solved with money? Alice had an emergency C-section. The baby's in an incubator. You endangered both their lives. Do you even understand that?" My husband exploded, letting his emotions get the best of him. As for me, I also couldn't forgive them just because they were throwing money at us. I agree with my husband. No amount of money can make this right. You will face the consequences of your actions. It seemed like my sister-in-law assumed that throwing money at us would make us forgive them, but this situation was not that simple. Thankfully, both my daughter and I, although she was in an incubator, were fine. But had there been any mistake, we might not be here now, and it seemed like my sister-in-law was entirely oblivious to this. I suspected my brother-in-law felt the same way. Thinking about this, I realized I couldn't forgive them or consider a settlement lightly. At my words, my sister-in-law flared up and raised her voice. "What do you mean? This is all because of her! She knew I couldn't get pregnant, and yet she kept rubbing her belly in front of me. Was that a jab at me? I was furious. That's why I did what I did, to make sure she never does anything like that again." Now I knew why she had kicked me, but there was something that didn't make sense. I hadn't met her often since I got pregnant, and every time she saw me, she would go into her room and not come out. So how did she see me rubbing my belly? That part was a mystery to me. But no matter what she said now, it wouldn't erase what she had done. Neither my husband nor I had any intention of forgiving her. "I understand that you're struggling, but that doesn't justify doing something like this to Alice. No matter the reason, endangering a life is never acceptable." My husband explained the obvious to them, but they were each looking elsewhere, not even trying to listen to us. It seemed like they wanted to get over with this as soon as possible. Seeing the two of them not showing any remorse, I felt my condition worsen. "Are we done here? I just had surgery and I'm not feeling well. If you continue to cause a ruckus in this room, I'll call the police." Arguing here wasn't going to resolve anything, and talking to the two of them was too hard for me, as I was still recovering. After my husband kicked them out, I sighed heavily. We had enough evidence because my husband had recorded their conversation. My mother-in-law was also unable to contain her anger because of what her daughter had done, putting my life and that of her grandchild in danger. And so, we decided to press charges against my sister-in-law. We filed a complaint with the police. My sister-in-law was taken to the police station. Afterwards, through a lawyer, we started negotiations. But my sister-in-law insisted to the lawyer, "I've done nothing wrong. This woman has been flaunting her pregnancy in front of me, causing me emotional distress when I myself am struggling with infertility. She's not innocent either, so she should be open to a settlement." At first, she had been eager to pay any amount of money, but then she began to claim her innocence. She insisted we should just pretend none of this happened because we were both at fault. When she first saw my husband in the hospital, she was visibly intimidated. But now, determined to avoid paying, she put up a stubborn fight throughout the process. However, she had no idea our conversation in the hospital room had been recorded. As soon as the evidence was presented, both their faces turned ashen. "Even with such clear evidence, you still claim you're innocent? I'm afraid that won't fly." After enduring so much insult and our refusal to agree to a settlement, my sister-in-law, in anger, flung the coffee that was before her at us. Thankfully, the coffee was cold, so we didn't get burned. Furthermore, their outrageous behavior and language in the office resulted in additional charges, forcing them to increase the compensation amount. Trying to calm his infuriated wife, my brother-in-law left the office. With the assault charges against me and the current incident, the amount we demanded from my sister-in-law had become substantial. When we told my mother-in-law about what had happened, she looked deeply remorseful, saying, "I'm so sorry for what my daughter has done. There's no need for you to agree to a settlement. I'll make sure she faces the consequences." She apologized tearfully. I couldn't help but think, how could a grown-up cause so much distress to their own parents? Somehow, I felt incredibly sorry for my mother-in-law. In the end, my sister-in-law was asked to pay a hefty compensation. Shocked by the amount, she called me repeatedly, insisting that we should reduce the amount because we were both at fault. I could not comprehend how she could make such an argument after all she had done. "No matter how many times you call, the answer remains the same. We have no intention to reduce the amount, nor to agree to a settlement. Honestly, your calls are becoming a nuisance. Please stop." Because she was so persistent, I ended up snapping at her. This caused her to lose her temper, and, unbelievably, she barged into my apartment. "Hey, you're there, right? I know you're in there. Get out here, now! Coward." I was resting on the sofa due to the pain from my surgery when she started pounding on the door and shouting these incomprehensible insults. "Hey, what on earth are you doing? Is everything okay with you? Your shouting is disturbing everyone else. Please stop." I yelled back at her while she continued to bang on the door. There were elderly people and families with babies in the apartment. Despite it being past 8 p.m., she was causing such a ruckus. I wondered if she ever considered that people might be sleeping. Of course, my husband was still at work and hadn't returned home. Since I got discharged from the hospital, I've been visiting my daughter every day. Feeling unwell and dealing with her unannounced visit and the commotion, I was at my wit's end. "No matter how many times you come here, my mind won't change. Please don't come here anymore," I said, fighting back despite feeling unwell and pale. But my sister-in-law was desperate for a settlement, and my concerns seemed to be irrelevant to her. "I didn't do this because I wanted to, you know. It's because of your intrusions that things have come to this. It's presumptuous of you to get pregnant before me. Shouldn't you have been more considerate and waited to get pregnant after us?" It seemed like she saw pregnancy as some sort of competition. I don't think pregnancy is a competition, or that it's more honorable to get pregnant first. But for my sister-in-law, who has struggled with infertility for many years, it seemed like she viewed pregnancy in that way. Everyone has different values, but that's no excuse to hurt others. I understand you're upset about not being able to have children, but that's no reason to hurt others. So I cannot forgive you. You put my daughter in danger, and for that, you will be held responsible. Above everything else, the fact that she had hurt my daughter was unforgivable. Just then, the sound of sirens could be heard from outside. It seems that someone in the apartment had reported the disturbance. Well, I suppose if you're banging on someone's door and yelling at this hour, it's inevitable that the police would be called. What do you mean the police are here? Open the door! You have to hide me! Despite my sister-in-law's pleas for me to hide her, I had no intention of doing so. The police arrived at the apartment and began questioning her. I also explained the situation from my perspective. Just at that moment, my husband came back to the apartment, and I filled him in on what had happened. Considering what had happened before, my husband told the police everything, and they took my sister-in-law away in their car. That night, my brother-in-law called to tell me that he was divorcing my sister-in-law and asked me not to involve him in this issue, a rather self-serving request. Apparently, one of my husband's colleagues had been at the hospital where I was admitted, and he overheard my brother-in-law's conversation. When he got to work, the gossip spread among the female employees, and my brother-in-law was looked down upon. The situation worsened, and somehow the story reached the HR department. My brother-in-law, realizing he couldn't talk his way out of it, confessed everything. He was then told that someone like him couldn't stay in the company and was going to be transferred to a regional office. So he doesn't want to get involved in any more problems. I can't deal with her issues anymore. If any more problems arise, I'll be fired. So please leave me out of it. With that, he hung up, and I haven't heard from him since. Afterward, we received a substantial compensation from my sister-in-law, and to ensure she would never come near us again, we changed our phone numbers and moved away. Even if she ran out of money and needed help, she wouldn't know where to find us. A few months later, my daughter was discharged from the hospital. She didn't have any lingering effects and was growing up healthy. Rumor has it that my sister-in-law was in substantial debt. At first, she was moving from friend to friend, but she was never contributing to the living expenses and stayed for far too long, so they kicked her out. My sister-in-law, who has no place to live and no money, is working part-time to pay off her debts.
Are you still single? A lonely life is pretty miserable. Those were the words thrown at me by my ex-husband who left me and our eldest son 10 years ago. The man who once betrayed us by having an affair with our son's ex-wife and left still looked down on us, smirking and appearing triumphant the whole time. I just waited, silently, letting my ex-husband ramble on. All I could do was bow my head and tremble my shoulders as he gleefully talked about how happy he is now and how pitiful he finds us. Maybe he thought I was crying, but I wasn't. I had to do that, or I would have burst out laughing. Seeing my ex-husband's behavior, someone tapped his shoulder. He turned around, and upon seeing that person, his face went pale and he looked at me. Eh? What do you mean? Eh? Didn't I tell you? My ex-husband, looking utterly confused, alternated his gaze between us. I decided to fill him in on what had happened in the last 10 years. I'm Susan. I'm turning 56 this year. I thought we were just a normal, lively family with our eldest son and his wife to save money. That belief started to crumble about 10 years ago, just 2 years after we moved in. We didn't have a daughter, so I thought it was natural for my then-husband to dote on Nancy, our daughter-in-law. He would take her out for meals and seemed concerned about her. Thinking it was his way of caring, as she might have had a hard time with her in-laws, I started to worry a few months before the incident. Nancy and my husband had been going out together frequently. At first, I thought it was because our son was busy with work, but it became too frequent, going out 2 or 3 times a week. I gently reprimanded him. Please moderate how much you take Nancy out. What's wrong with doting on my daughter-in-law? I'm just saying you should also let your son spend time with his wife. All right, I'll be careful, he agreed, albeit grudgingly. But then, his business trips and Nancy's travels, suspiciously, began to coincide. Nancy claimed she was traveling with friends, but she rarely went anywhere with our son. Even on a day when our son had taken leave to ask her out, "I've got something urgent," she would leave alone. My son couldn't hide his shock, and my husband tried to console him. But soon, he would leave too. "I've got an urgent matter." Naturally, I went out. Business trips are frequent these days. Yes, work's gotten busier. Nancy goes on trips too, often at the same time as your trips. "What's that got to do with anything? I'm working." His evasive responses made me suspicious. Eventually, our son took a day off and followed them. He saw them cozying up in restaurants and women's boutiques. Though I had my suspicions, I never imagined my husband was having an affair with my son's wife. "No way," I muttered. "Are you sure it's not a mistake? Maybe you confused them with someone else." It was Dad's car number plate. I saw them go into a shop, arms linked. My son was devastated. I suggested we talk to them, though I was in shock myself. I couldn't believe that my husband would see his son's wife that way. I convinced myself that talking would help, though I had no idea what to say. I just waited for them to return. They came back that night as if nothing was wrong. We just happened to meet at the station, so we came back together. We called the two of them to the living room for a talk, but it was hardly what you could call a discussion. "Why were you out so late with Nancy?" "Sorry, I'll make sure to let you know next time." "That's not the point. Why do you need to go out so often, just the two of you?" I said I'm sorry. I just can't help but adore my daughter, you understand? My husband kept insisting. "It's just normal family affection, and I'm just fond of her like she's my own daughter." Things like that. He stubbornly maintained that he was just being overly affectionate toward her, even when it came to spending time alone with her, excluding our eldest son, and even about being seen with their arms linked. "Nancy, what about you? Why do you go out so much with Dad?" "Well, Henry seemed busy with work." "Dad's working too. You never try to go out with me." "I'm sorry, Tom has the money and he takes me to lots of places. I got too comfortable with him, like he was my real dad," Nancy said, gazing intently at my husband, treating him like her real father. Their attitude, constantly making excuses and offering only superficial apologies, showed no signs of remorse. In fact, they seemed defiant. As if to say, our inability to accept them, trusting each other like a real father and daughter, made us small-minded troublemakers. "Are we done here? We're tired. You should be nicer to Tom, wife." "Yeah, tell her, Nancy." "Then maybe you should be nicer to your husband, our son. I might consider it if he becomes successful like Tom." They were dismissive of our feelings throughout, not showing any signs of understanding. We had no choice but to propose a new discussion for the next day and retire to our bedrooms. The incident happened the next day. What is this? The next morning, I found a letter and a filled-out divorce application on the living room table. Written in my husband's familiar handwriting, the lengthy letter was filled with inconceivable things. I struggled to believe that it was written by him. "I've been attracted to Nancy since my son brought her home. Since he's no good, I thought I should make her happy. I'd rather choose a young girl over a middle-aged woman like you." The nonsensical message was hard to comprehend. I felt dizzy trying to understand the letter. Finally, it read, "Don't interfere with two people in love. Just quietly get a divorce." I was at a loss. The second letter was from Nancy. It derided how pathetic our eldest son was, even mocking our saving efforts as stingy. Nancy's letter, clearly after money, preferring my husband, who spent freely over our frugal eldest son, left me speechless. Younger me is better than Susan. Tom said so. Please let him go. It even contained a passage looking down on her husband's mother. I never imagined Nancy always well-dressed, was targeting Tom. A chilling thought. Our eldest son, hearing this later, looked just as pale and shocked as I did, shaking and unable to speak, retreating to his room. I tried to contact my husband numerous times afterward, to no avail. He seemed to have taken his savings with him, leaving me with no recourse but to cry myself to sleep. Haunted by the treatment from my husband and Nancy, my family and I lived on. Our turning point came 10 years later, at a certain steakhouse. I had some business and found myself at a high-end steakhouse that day. I planned to have a late lunch there. While relaxing in the calm atmosphere of the restaurant, I heard a voice I could never forget from behind me. Turning around, I saw my ex-husband, who had once eloped with Nancy. He was in a somewhat shabby suit, speaking loudly with the owner, his voice echoing through the restaurant. I thought about confronting him, but before I could, he noticed me and approached. "What are you doing here?" Seeing me sitting alone at a table, he smirked and took a seat opposite me. After scrutinizing my clothes and noticing the lack of ring on my left hand, he started talking with a triumphant look. "You not filing the divorce papers right away made things difficult for us. I'm sorry about that." "Well, a middle-aged woman like you won't get married again." My ex-husband kept talking, showing off the ring on his finger, and bragging about how happy he had been with Nancy, even though I hadn't asked. He exaggeratedly pitied the miserable lives he assumed my son and I were living. "You're still single? A lonely life is miserable." I remained silent, looking down the entire time. I felt like I might burst into laughter otherwise. But my ex, misunderstanding my silence, said something absurd. "Well, if you beg, I might consider getting back with you." "What?" "When you do, serve me sincerely, I'll make you a caretaker for me and Nancy. Be grateful that I'm willing to take in a middle-aged woman like you." Talk in your sleep. His nonsensical remarks hadn't changed, and I couldn't help but respond. He seemed shocked, thinking I would be grateful and apologize. Seeing his foolish expression, someone tapped his shoulder from behind. "What do you want with my wife?" "Eh? The owner." "Wife? What do you mean?" "Didn't I tell you?" I took the hand of the steakhouse owner who had walked up beside me. My ex-husband, confused, looked back and forth between the owner and me. I decided to tell him about the past 10 years. After the incident, my son was utterly disheartened. Worried about his listless state, his boss took him to a steakhouse one day. There, he became friendly with a woman. She had also been abandoned by her husband and found solace in their shared experiences, gradually bringing my son back to life. After many meetings and conversations, my son thought she and I would get along, so he brought me here. That's how I hit it off with the owner here. He's been very kind to me. What? You weren't stalling with the divorce papers because you were still hung up on me? Not at all. I just didn't want to do things your way. I was astounded at his self-serving interpretation. Correcting his misunderstanding, I told him why I was about to laugh earlier. You were calling us miserable, but aren't you truly the miserable one? What do you mean? I know. You've been constantly complaining to the owner here about Nancy. Hearing this, my ex-husband's face turned pale. Yes, I had heard about the talks my frequent visitor ex-husband had with the owner complaining about Nancy. The owner was outraged by his unreasonable stories. At the same time, he realized that those stories were about me and discreetly told me. Your current wife is young and reckless with money, isn't she? Yet you can still afford to come to this steakhouse. You're just pretending, aren't you? It doesn't suit you. Realizing he had been sharing embarrassing stories with someone who knew everything, my ex-husband's face turned from pale to red as he looked down. But I felt no sympathy for him now. This man could still throw words like lonely and miserable at me, whom he believes he made unhappy. Remembering the hurt look on my son's face back then, I glared at my ex-husband. What about the ring? You're not wearing one. I have it. I just took it off because it gets in the way of work. Saying so, I pulled out a ring from my bag and slipped it onto my left ring finger. The owner, also unable to wear his ring during work, had purposefully put on our matching rings and come to the restaurant. Seeing this, my ex-husband seemed to shrink, his shoulders hunched. I was wrong. I just want to talk to you one more time. Talk with someone who still looks down on me as lonely and miserable? What will we talk about? Please, I was wrong. Forgive me. Then bring some compensation for the divorce first. We can talk after that. Knowing how much he had complained to the owner, I was well aware of my ex-husband's financial troubles, but that was not our doing. He acted as he pleased and now faced the consequences. I had no reason to involve myself in his troubles. I decided to confront him with reality. Don't bother us any longer today. It's an important day. I don't want anything to do with you ever again. Huh? Why is it important? I hadn't come to the steakhouse today to beat down my ex-husband I unexpectedly encountered. I had important business. Ignoring my puzzled ex-husband, I turned toward the sound of the door opening. Mom, sorry. Did I keep you waiting? I apologize for being late. Work held me up. It's okay, don't worry. I smiled and greeted the two who appeared. It was my son, neatly dressed in a suit, and the kind, beautiful woman he had become close to. Much more gentle than Nancy, to whom my ex-husband was visibly shocked. Noticing his father, my son was startled but stood protectively in front of her. My ex-husband, disregarding their attitude, began to act arrogantly towards my son. Found yourself a fine woman? Like father, like son. Who might you be? What? Talking to your own father like that? My dad is only this owner here. My son, now resolute, confronted my ex-husband. Unhappy with his attitude, my ex-husband tried to assert his paternal rights, but no one here was on his side. Everyone looked at him coldly as my son spoke further. I don't know a man who elopes with his son's wife. I was wrong. I'll give Nancy back to you. Give back? A woman who chose her husband's father over her husband and made herself unhappy? Don't say that. We were a family. Let's start over. That's impossible. You said you had to make her happy because your son was no good. Do as you please and never involve us again. My son echoed the words my ex-husband had once written in a letter back to him. My ex-husband, flustered and trying to save face, couldn't erase the events of 10 years ago. Fed up with his persistent behavior, I delivered the final blow. Today is the day we meet her parents. Could you please leave us alone? At my cold words, his face turned bright red, and he seemed unable to say anything more. Having no place left, he finally turned towards the exit, just as Nancy appeared. Why are you here eating steak alone? I want some too. Nancy, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, had changed even more than my ex-husband. It seemed he had spoiled her considerably. Her once youthful skin, marred by her diet, looked older than her actual age. The Nancy who once looked down on me as a woman was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, she had been searching for my ex-husband, hoping to get money from him, and barged in. Noticing us only after causing a scene and being reprimanded by the owner, Nancy approached the woman beside my son with a rude attitude. Huh? What? The next wife? Despite not filing divorce and still being hung up on him? There's no lingering affection for a wife who chooses dad over me. Such a plain woman suits you. Thank you. I'll be happy on your behalf. Despite Nancy's abusive words, the woman responded without taking offense, leaving Nancy wide-eyed and screaming even louder. But as I had told my ex-husband, Nancy, who couldn't see reality, had no chance of winning. My ex-husband looked uncomfortably embarrassed. You'll never be happy. You should just live miserably. Enough, Nancy. Let's go home. Why? Kick them out. I haven't even eaten steak yet. It's not fair. Nancy, throwing a tantrum like a spoiled child, was dragged away by my ex-husband. After the stormy event, we exchanged knowing smiles. Shall we start over? Are you hungry? I'm fine. My parents will be here soon. Then, darling, please prepare the most delicious steak today. Leave it to me. The rest of the day went smoothly and we had a peaceful time. Seeing my son's happy face made me content. The steak that day, cooked with care by my husband, tasted better than ever. From now on, cherish real happiness. Yes, Mom. You'll be happy too. Thank you. Since then, it seems my ex-husband has not been seen at my husband's restaurant. After such a disgraceful display, it's unlikely he'll ever appear. I don't know what became of the two, but whether they're miserable or lonely, it doesn't concern me. Now, I only think about cherishing the most important people in front of me.